Our story begins with the world's only SSS-class awakened hero, who, after 5 years of protecting humanity, was ruthlessly sent before a military tribunal. Countless people, seemingly moved to pity by the bloodshed of war, were now demanding his skills be banned and that he be sent to prison. Looking at the faces inside and outside the courtroom, he suddenly burst into a fit of laughter, which, naturally, was the last thing they expected. In reality, he told them they didn't need to go to all this trouble. Since everyone was so desperate for an explanation, he decided to give them exactly what they wanted. As of today, he announced his formal retirement from the Ability Association. From now on, when the tides of monsters return, he will not be there to stop them. The president of the association, Invancio, watched him with eyes wide in disbelief. He asked if the hero was truly trying to use his resignation as a way to threaten him. The president reminded him that the association had more than just one SSS class member at its disposal. He claimed that if the hero thought this behavior would intimidate them, he was very much mistaken. The president then offered him one final chance to take back his words. He was told to accept the verdict quietly so he could remain a member and continue enjoying all the association's benefits. The hero simply mocked the idea. To him, the status and perks of the association were worth nothing now. He told them to give those benefits to someone else, and as he spoke, his body began to tremble slightly. Suddenly, the heavy metal chains designed to suppress awakened abilities shattered into pieces. At that same moment, a terrifying surge of yellow energy descended and wrapped itself around his body. The sheer intensity of this power was at least SS class, a truly formidable display, to be honest. But before he could act, a young woman in her 20s suddenly appeared by his side, seeing him enveloped in that yellow light. Her eyes burned with visible anger as she swung her palm, releasing a light blue energy that was just as powerful as his own. The collision of these two energies instantly triggered a violent explosion that tore through the sky. Terrifying shockwaves of power radiated outward in an instant, shaking everything around them. As the smoke finally cleared, a burly man appeared, his gaze fixed intensely on the young woman by our hero's side. He demanded to know if Egio intended to protect her, even though Li Xiao had held back the tide alone for 5 years. During that time, he had provided other ability users with the precious time they needed to grow their own strength. And now, we see the association wondering how they could possibly suppress the monster tide so easily without him. Not only do they lack any sense of gratitude, but they actually have the nerve to demand a severe punishment. Su Qian, a double S-class awakened, simply scoffed at the situation with a cold sneer. He argued that while Li Xiao had great merits in the past, this time was different, or so he claimed. He insisted that if it weren't for her, they wouldn't be facing such difficulties or have suffered such a massive loss. The people in the courtroom nodded in approval as they listened to Su Qian's words, seemingly convinced by his logic. In that moment, Li Xiao looked over at the female doctor standing beside him. He told her she didn't really have to intervene, as no one could stop him if he truly decided to leave. The doctor simply shook her head, remembering how the monster tide had once threatened to consume everything. She confessed that if it hadn't been for him, she would have been dead long ago. In a situation like this, she felt she couldn't possibly stand by and do nothing, and with that, she turned away. She declared that if they wanted to detain Li Xiao today, they would have to send her to prison first. She made it clear that they would only take him over her dead body, a bold stance that made Su Qian's eyes turn cold. Su Qian asked the doctor if, as an SSS class seed, she wasn't afraid this behavior would ruin her entire future. She replied that she didn't care about the future, she only knew that Li Xiao was the one who had saved her. At that moment, up on the judicial bench, Inban Zhao's expression was looking rather unpleasant as well. He asked Li Xiao one last time if he was truly certain about wanting to resign from the Ability Association, and our hero simply nodded. He confirmed he was sure, and the official replied that, in light of his past merits, they would reach a decision. Today's legal matter would be dropped, but there was a catch, and a rather petty one at that. It wouldn't be recorded as a voluntary resignation. Instead, the association would officially expel him from their ranks. Furthermore, they boasted that they had already trained many other SS-class ability users to take his place. The world wouldn't simply fall apart just because they were losing him, or so they liked to believe. After delivering his speech, Inban Zhao watched him with a smug, self-satisfied look, but he was in for a disappointment. He didn't see even a flicker of anger on Li Xiao's face. You see, over the long years, things had changed. The endless struggle against the beasts had left Li Xiao feeling utterly exhausted deep down. Only he truly understood the horrors within the tide and just how terrifying the most powerful beasts actually were. Now that the association wanted to be rid of him, he found himself feeling more relieved than anything else. Inban Zhao's voice rang out again, asking if he had clearly understood the words that had just been spoken. Li Xiao calmly replied that he knew, and then simply asked if he was finally free to leave. Inban Zhao slowly turned his head, watching as the young man prepared to make his exit. In the eyes of the official, a faint, fleeting trace of regret began to reveal itself. Li Xiao announced his departure, telling the others to focus on their development within the association. He encouraged them to strive for level 3S as soon as possible, adding that they could always come find him in the future. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure vanished from the courtroom entirely. In an instant, we see that he had already reached the outskirts of the city, leaving it all behind. Outside, we see that very few traces of human cities remain, as the world has been utterly transformed since the awakening of abilities. Ancient, ruined trees have undergone strange mutations, while terrifying beasts, not yet at their full strength, lurk in the shadows, devouring whatever they find. Li Xiao didn't stop for a single moment. From the outskirts of the city, he simply vanished without leaving a trace behind. At the exact moment of his departure, deep within the ruins of a city 100 miles from the border, a mutant white tiger suddenly opened its eyes, staring intently toward the horizon. Looking toward Star City, we realize this is a powerful beast, one that far surpasses even the SS-level ability users. But in this moment, a flicker of genuine doubt flashed within the eyes of this mutant white tiger. It wondered if that powerful human had actually abandoned his city, seemingly unafraid that the beasts might seize such an opportunity. Could he really be leaving them open to a large-scale attack? Meanwhile, a giant snake covered entirely in crimson scales, with chilling, vertical pupils, was also fixated on the distant silhouette of Star City. This creature is another beast king above the SS level, and it asked the tiger if it felt the change as well. The mutant white tiger's voice echoed in response, confirming that the man named Li Xiao had indeed left the human settlement, and he had done so entirely alone. It was only a brief revelation of his aura, but for a creature like this, an error in judgment was simply impossible. The cold voice of the red giant snake hissed that he had been holding them back for so many years. Perhaps he finally reached his limit, or maybe he was using a trick to lure them into a trap, which, to be honest, would be quite like him. The mutant white tiger paused to consider this possibility. After reflecting for a moment, it spoke as if a new thought had suddenly occurred to it. It recalled sensing that several new SS-level ability users had recently been born within that human city. It wondered if Li Xiao wanted them to attack now, only to circle back and annihilate them all at once, a classic pincer move, if there ever was one. The tiger dismissed the idea, noting it was impossible for those newcomers who had only just reached the SS level. If they dared to face them head-on, he was certain he could easily kill them all himself. In any case, it is always better to be safe than sorry. But as for this man named Li Xiao, since he had handed them such a golden opportunity, they weren't about to let it go to waste. Their plan was simple: gather the beast pack to test the waters first and see what happened. After saying that, a bone-chilling roar echoed from the mutant white tiger's throat, and very soon, countless mutant beasts began making their way toward the white tiger's location. In no time at all, a massive tide of beasts had gathered, while on the other side of the world, we return to the Ability Association headquarters, where one of the young men was idly playing with blue flames in his hand. He spoke with total indifference, claiming that an SSS level was nothing special, even without Li Xiao around. He told the others they still had each other, and if Li Xiao wanted to leave, then he should just go. Upon hearing these words, Yin Banxiao's expression brightened considerably, and he agreed that the boy was right. The association now had the three of them, all SSS-level ability users, at its disposal. Dealing with the mutant beast tides would, in his mind, be even easier than it had been before. As they listened to Yin Banxiao, Jin Xian and the other two couldn't help but let confident smiles spread across their faces. To them, it was only natural. With three SSS-level users working together, those Beast Kings were hardly a concern. They hadn't appeared in a long time, but even if those Beast Kings actually showed their faces again, they would only end up as corpses at their feet, and perhaps they could even do it in front of all the citizens. They imagined personally demonstrating the slaughter of a Beast King, provided they could record a successful kill. That way, they could completely overshadow all of Li Xiao's past achievements within the entire Ability Association. In their minds, there would soon be no one left who could possibly challenge their standing in the eyes of Jin Xian and the others. A flicker of excitement was visible on their faces, and it was right at that moment that Yin Banxiao spoke up again. He mentioned that a team of ability users guarding the city border had just sent in a new report. Apparently, someone had spotted Li Xiao, and it seemed he had already officially left the association's jurisdiction. Upon hearing this, Jin Xian simply waved his hand with a calm expression, since Li Xiao had already been expelled. To the association, it no longer mattered where he went or what he did with his future. As long as he didn't cause any trouble within their territory, they were perfectly happy to let him do as he pleased. Of course, he added that if Li Xiao ever realized his mistake and wanted to admit he was wrong, he would only be allowed to return as a lowly combat member and nothing more. Naturally, everyone in the conference room found this prospect quite amusing and broke into laughter. But what did it really mean for him to leave the jurisdiction of the Ability Association? Half a day had already passed. Li Xiao, despite being stationed at the city's edge for so long, had always been the one closest to the nest of the ancient beasts. In truth, this was one of the very few times in 5 years that Li Xiao had actually stepped outside the association's urban borders. After all, the constant pressure from that SSS-level beast nest had made it impossible for him to ever leave his post. If he had ever left the border he guarded without permission, the consequences would have been dire. It was highly likely that, shortly after his departure, the beast nest would have launched a full-scale attack on the city. But now, having resigned from the association, even if those beasts were preparing to strike, Li Xiao felt that none of it was his responsibility anymore, which, to be honest, was a fair assessment. We see him turn his gaze toward his surroundings, observing the countless things that had changed since his birth. Vast stretches of greenery reached dozens, even hundreds of meters high, nearly blotting out the sky above. We see various alien beasts scurrying up and down beneath this dense, overgrown vegetation. And tucked under all that greenery, one can still find many traces of the city ruins from 5 years ago. But right at that moment, unusual energy fluctuations flickered within Li Xiao's perception. Looking closely at Li Xiao, we see he couldn't help but reveal a small hint of surprise in his eyes. A low, dull roar suddenly echoed in Li Xiao's ears. The branches of the surrounding giant trees began to stir. They trembled quite violently, and in the very next instant, a massive head emerged. A giant gray wolf, nearly 20 meters in size with tusks growing toward the ground, came charging out from the depths of the forest, foam at the corners of its mouth. It lunged at Li Xiao, extending its front paws with sharp claws that glinted with a cold, lethal light. Against such a sudden attack, even an unprepared A-rank ability user could be killed instantly. Li Xiao, however, simply stood his ground, showing absolutely no reaction to the giant wolf's assault. In a heartbeat, those razor-sharp claws were only a few centimeters away from Li Xiao's head. But at that exact moment, the giant wolf seemed to encounter something utterly terrifying. Its movements suddenly froze mid-air, as if time itself had stopped for the beast. Li Xiao slowly turned his head, gazing up at the gray wolf that was dozens of times larger than himself. His face was a picture of genuine surprise. He clearly hadn't expected an alien beast to actually dare attack him. To be fair, the strength of this giant gray wolf was roughly at the A-rank level. But in the past, an A-rank wouldn't have even qualified as cannon fodder in front of someone like Li Xiao. Even if it were a giant gray wolf, it wouldn't be a true S-rank alien beast. In the past, when Li Xiao fought the SS-rank Beast King, this creature would have been a mere foot soldier, killed instantly by his hand. To think it would dare attack him just to buy the Beast King a fraction of a second, it was a bold move, to say the least. As Li Xiao spoke, a flicker of instinctive terror surged within the giant gray wolf's massive eyes. Beneath its fur, as it hovered near the ground, an indescribable dread began to take hold. And in the very next moment, without any warning whatsoever, the terror in the wolf's eyes simply froze. It suddenly solidified, and every trace of life within the gray wolf's body vanished in an instant. The massive body crashed to the earth, causing the surrounding ground to tremble violently under its weight. Meanwhile, in a dense patch of forest not far away, several figures were hiding deep within the shadows. Their gazes were fixed intently on the spot where Li Xiao was standing. They all watched in complete horror, staring at Li Xiao and the lifeless gray wolf slumped beside him. An A-rank gray wolf had died just like that, without offering even a hint of resistance. They wondered if this man could possibly be an SS-rank ability user. Or perhaps, they feared, he was actually a humanoid alien beast in disguise. And right at that moment, the pupils of the hidden men suddenly contracted in fear. They realized, quite suddenly, that Li Xiao was looking directly toward their hiding spot. As he spoke, Li Xiao calmly raised a hand and reached out toward the dense forest. In the next instant, several secret hiding places collapsed with a deafening crash. The men felt the world spin like a whirlwind, and by the time their vision cleared, Li Xiao was already standing right in front of them. Staring at Li Xiao, the question burned in their eyes. Was he a human being, or merely a monster wearing a man's face? A flicker of involuntary terror flashed in their eyes. They desperately wanted to escape, but they soon discovered that their bodies simply wouldn't obey. It seemed that, under the weight of such a powerful force, there was no way for them to move at all. But Li Xiao didn't give them an answer right away. Instead, he stood there, quietly evaluating the people trembling before him. If Li Xiao's memory served him correctly, this place was near the closest city managed by the Ability Association. That city was at least hundreds of kilometers away, and the strongest person standing before him was merely A-rank. Even the gray wolf from a moment ago would have been a difficult match for them, to say the least. So, how on earth had they managed to travel hundreds of kilometers? He noted that reaching the city managed by the association was a long journey from here, especially given their strength. Li Xiao looked at the group and asked how they had managed to avoid the dangers to get this far. As Li Xiao spoke, they suddenly realized that the crushing force holding them down had significantly eased. They regained their mobility, but this time, not a single one of them even considered trying to run. Everything Li Xiao had demonstrated so far was a display of sheer, overwhelming power. He could have easily killed everyone on the scene without breaking a sweat. "We aren't from the city managed by the Ability Association," one of them managed to say. He explained they came from City I, looking at Li Xiao while nervously swallowing hard. They were so incredibly tense that, after saying those few words, they fell back into a heavy silence. Watching Li Xiao cautiously, they recalled the wolf's death and still assumed he was only S-rank. But just now, Li Xiao had controlled them with such ease and brought them before him like mere toys. Such feats were beyond even the SS rank ability user who guarded their own city eye. This strange and powerful man likely possessed a strength that rivaled the entire defense of their home. And interestingly enough, that SS rank user didn't belong to a city managed by the Ability Association either. Upon hearing their response, we see a flicker of genuine surprise cross Li Xiao's face. But he soon recalled something from his time before he had retired from the Ability Association. Li Xiao had heard rumors that while most cities had been consolidated and brought under the association's wing, there was still a small handful of cities that, for various reasons, mostly stubborn residents, refused to leave. Those cities had never been merged into the association and continued to exist quite independently. They simply weren't under the association's jurisdiction, which is a bold choice in this world. He wondered if this city they mentioned was one of those rare, defiant places. "Sir, my name is Sumin," one of them ventured. "I heard you mention the association earlier. Are you also a member of the Ability Association?" he asked nervously. While Li Xiao was busy guessing their origins, Sumin and his companions were doing the exact same thing to him. He watched Li Xiao and waited for an answer, but Li Xiao knew he wasn't part of that world anymore. Li Xiao simply smiled and shook his head, just as a system notification reminded him he had only 12 hours left. The prompt urged him to complete his daily task as soon as possible and check in. The sudden chime of the system's voice echoed in his mind, breaking his train of thought. Li Xiao's eyes shifted slightly as he considered his next move. He had been looking for a place to stay, and this new information changed things considerably. A city like City Eye, outside the association's reach, sounded like the perfect place for someone like him. Doesn't this place meet his requirements perfectly? After all, if one could live in a city, who would willingly choose to stay in the depths of the mountains and forests? How far away is this City Eye you're talking about? Li Xiao asked suddenly, his interest clearly piqued. About 10 kilometers. It's not very far at all. Since Li Xiao was also an ability user, Sumin answered him with complete honesty. 10 kilometers? To be honest, that really wasn't far at all. This answer matched his own estimates, as only an A-rank ability user could typically reach this area. Immediately after, he expressed his desire to go to City Eye and settle there for a long time. Upon hearing Li Xiao's words, Sumin and his group stood there, utterly stunned for a moment. A second later, we see their eyes light up with a look of pure surprise. You see, City Eye doesn't have the massive combat power provided by the Ability Association. To this day, it is still frequently targeted by small nests of alien beasts. Even with an SS rank ability user present, it is extremely difficult for City Eye to repel a beast nest every single time. The only stroke of luck is that, because the scale of City Eye isn't very large, it hasn't yet attracted the attention of an SS rank beast tide. Otherwise, one fears that the entire city would have been destroyed long ago, and now, a powerful user of at least S rank, and possibly even SS rank, wanted to come to City Eye to live permanently. This, as we can imagine, was something truly monumental for City Eye. "Are you serious?" Sumin asked, taking a deep, shaky breath. Deep down, he was terrified that Li Xiao might just be playing a joke on him. "Do you think I'm joking?" Li Xiao replied calmly. "In that case, let's head back now." Sumin was suddenly overcome with excitement. "I know a safe path. Please, come with us." As he spoke, Sumin looked towards City Eye, planning to lead Li Xiao along a route that avoided the alien beasts. Upon hearing this, Li Xiao looked at Sumin with a look of genuine surprise. Was he really suggesting they avoid beasts while standing in front of an SS rank user like himself? To be honest, even the Beast Kings wouldn't dare ask Li Xiao to take a detour in their presence. "That won't be necessary," he said. "Just point me in a straight line towards City Eye. I'll take you back directly." Li Xiao's blunt way of speaking left Sumin a bit dazed. It seemed he didn't quite grasp the sheer power contained within Li Xiao's simple words. But just at that moment, because they had spent so much time talking in one spot, the local beasts noticed them. A group of alien beasts that had been wandering nearby raised their heads, some standing dozens of meters tall. Radiating a terrifying pressure, the creatures began to slowly close in on Li Xiao's position. They were level A, 3 level A alien beasts, to be precise. As we see this scene unfold, Sumin's expression shifted instantly into one of alarm. The others who had come with Sumin also grew tense, their bodies locking up in fear. But in the very next moment, an utterly terrifying surge of power began to erupt from Li Xiao's body, spreading outward like a tidal wave. Under the pressure of this terrifying and indescribable ability, everyone else stood frozen. The massive forms of the 3 level A beasts were instantly paralyzed where they stood. But amidst the silence, Li Xiao simply raised his palm. With a slight gesture, and without any struggle at all, those 3 powerful level A beasts failed to put up even the slightest bit of resistance against him. Their entire bodies violently exploded. Now, we must remember that 5 years ago, before the alien beasts had even descended, City Eye was actually a very large and thriving city. But now, 5 years later, the area where the residents of City Eye still reside is only a third of what it used to be. The remaining 2/3 have already been reduced to ruins under the impact of the beast tides. When compared to the massive scale of the Ability Association city, the difference is striking. Yes, compared to that enormous stronghold, City I looks quite different now. The city walls on the edge of City I, which hold back the beasts, have become dilapidated and ruined. A team of exhausted ability users is stationed on those walls, staring anxiously into the distance. They live in constant fear of the next arrival of the alien beast tide. I wonder when the days of City I will finally come to an end, one of them sighed. The ability user spoke with a face deeply etched by fatigue and hopelessness. About half a day ago, they had successfully repelled a small wave of the beast tide. Unlike the association, which boasts a vast number of users, City I has very few defenders left. Because long ago, most of the ability users had already fled to the safety of the association. The remaining ability users who still stay here do so mostly because their families and friends are ordinary people. In City I, there aren't many users left, and with alien beasts running rampant, crossing the distance to the association is now impossible. And so, they chose to stay behind to protect City I. They protect their loved ones, though over the years, every beast tide has taken a heavy toll on their numbers. As of today, the number of users who can still maintain their combat power is growing smaller and smaller. At some point in the future, City I will likely share the fate of countless cities before it. With the death of the very last ability user, the city will finally collapse and perish, just like so many others. One user, stationed on the crumbling walls, couldn't help but wonder how wonderful it would be to possess power like Master Li Xiao's. We must remember that communication between cities has become incredibly difficult since the beasts appeared. Still, this exhausted defender couldn't stop himself from indulging in a bit of fantasy. Even though the world has been fractured since the descent of these alien creatures, they still managed to receive some scraps of information. Originally, the ability association wasn't nearly this large. Back then, many cities were banded together, struggling as one against the rising beast tides. And then came the day when the world's only SSS-level ability user arrived. Li Xiao fought as a member of the association and suppressed countless tides with his overwhelming strength. Because of him, many people flocked to the association for safety, eventually forming the massive city we see today. Unfortunately, the light in this guard's eyes soon began to dim. It was all just a fantasy, after all. Even with his limited strength, he understood perfectly well just how rare an SSS-level user truly is. To be honest, the strongest person in their city right now only reaches level B. He had no idea how much time or effort it would take to successfully reach the SSS level. If it were easy, life in City I wouldn't be quite so difficult for everyone involved. Only a true SSS-level ability user can stand against the beast kings that lead the alien hordes. Taking a deep breath, our weary defender rejoined the patrol team, waiting just ahead of him. Together, they continued their watch over the crumbling ruins of the city wall. But just then, from beyond the walls of Icon, a terrifying pressure of supernatural power suddenly blanketed the distant sky. We see a small black speck in the distance, growing larger at an almost unimaginable speed. As it drew closer to Icon, the guard's pupils contracted sharply in sheer disbelief. The other ability users guarding the wall began to show visible signs of panic. It was a supernatural pressure unlike anything they had ever felt before. They feared a beast king, but that panic soon faded because, at that exact moment, a figure appeared on the wall. It was Chen Xian. When he arrived on the wall, the defenders felt as though they finally had someone to lean on. "Don't be nervous," Chen Xian said, comforting those around him while keeping a solemn gaze on that distant speck. Before long, the shape enlarging in the distance became much clearer to everyone watching. And this is where they realized that the black speck wasn't what they had expected at all. It wasn't some kind of alien beast. To be honest, it looked much more like a human being. That human appeared to be carrying several other figures in his hands. "It's Xian and the others," someone shouted, finally recognizing the people being carried. In the very next instant, the figure holding Xian and the rest reached the city wall with incredible speed. "We're here," Li Xiao said calmly as he set Xian and the others back down on solid ground. And in this moment, we see that the faces of Xian and the others were looking slightly pale. It might be hard to believe, but even an A-class supernatural being like him seemed a bit dizzy from Li Xiao's speed. However, as they returned to Xian still felt as though everything was part of a dream. He finally understood why Li Xiao had asked him earlier to simply point out a direction in a straight line. Normally, A-class supernatural beings like them still need to carefully avoid the alien beasts. But Li Xiao simply charged straight through. Those terrifying alien beasts actually tried to hunt him down. And then, quite casually, they were all destroyed by Li Xiao along the way. Xian's body trembled slightly as he recalled the journey, if his memory served him correctly. Among the beasts that tried to hunt Li Xiao, there were several powerful S-class Suan creatures. The supernatural beings on patrol atop the city wall wondered how they had returned and who this stranger was. They rushed towards Suan's position, eyeing this newcomer, Li Xiao, with a great deal of caution. But at that exact moment, the second Xian laid eyes on Li Xiao. His expression shifted suddenly. It was a look of pure, utter incredulity. He realized this person was actually the great Li Xiao. Xian stared at Li Xiao, unable to believe what his own eyes were telling him. We must remember that, in this world, things are extremely difficult right now. Long-distance communication between cities is rare, as the tools required are considered high-level strategic materials. But Chen Xian, as the strongest guardian of Yichen, had been fortunate enough to see a video recording of Li Xiao before. The other supernatural beings who were standing guard nearby were absolutely stunned when they saw Chen Xian's shocked reaction to Li Xiao's presence. In the very next instant, everyone's eyes widened in realization, especially Suin and those standing beside Li Xiao. When they heard Chen Xian utter the name Li Xiao, Suin and the others felt as though their brains had simply stopped working. The name Li Xiao could have been a coincidence, but not if it referred to the most powerful SSS-class supernatural being in Yichen. We noticed that Chen Xian immediately added the title of Lord after Li Xiao's name. At that point, it became clear there is only one person in this world who deserves to be addressed that way. Good heavens, it really was him. The great Lord Li Xiao had actually arrived. Atop the city wall, countless shocked gazes fell upon Li Xiao, as if trying to confirm he was real. Like a distant dream, many supernatural beings in Yichen had fantasized about Li Xiao one day visiting their city. And now, quite suddenly, that unrealistic fantasy had become their new reality. Li Xiao's eyes showed a hint of surprise as he asked Chen Xian how he could possibly know his name. Upon hearing the question, Chen Xian nodded respectfully to the legendary figure. With a touch of excitement, he explained that he had once exchanged information with the Supernatural Beings Association. He had seen a video of him there. By the way, Lord Li Xiao, he asked, what brings you to Yichen today? Is there anything the supernatural beings of my city can do to assist you? As Chen Xian asked this, the patrolling guards listened intently, their expressions shifting toward a newfound sense of purpose. They looked ready to follow Li Xiao to the death at a single word, which, to be honest, is quite the commitment. For 5 long years, Yichen had suffered through daily invasions of beast tides on varying scales. Each time they repelled a tide, the ability users of Yichen understood the situation a little better. They knew how precious an SSS-class user like Li Xiao was, even if he didn't technically belong to their city. The faith they had built up in him over time was no less than the respect they held for Chen Xian himself. But then we hear the clarification. Lord Chen Xian, Lord Li Xiao hasn't come to Yichen for a specific task. He plans to live here. Suin, standing to one side, couldn't help but speak up, asking what he meant by living in Yichen. The very moment the words left Suin's mouth, the atmosphere changed completely. Including Chen Xian, everyone's pupils dilated and their bodies tensed up instinctively. They couldn't help but stand up in a state of pure excitement. Immediately after, that emotion took over. Their blood began to pump, their faces flushed red instantly. Li Xiao, the world's only SSS-class ability user, was here. He actually planned to live in Yichen. We have to wonder, were they all just dreaming? Was this truth or a lie? Some feared they were simply hearing things incorrectly. It's not a dream. It turns out it's true. Hey, why did you hit me? One of them cried out. I hit you to see if it was real. No, Lord Li Xiao. Another stammered, turning back to the legend. Do you really want to live in Yichen? Will the Ability Association even agree to that? Chen Xian asked, his voice trembling. He gradually calmed himself down, looking at Li Xiao while unable to hold back his questions. At the mention of the Ability Association, we see the smile on Li Xiao's face begin to fade. He slowly shook his head and explained that he was no longer a member of that association. Not a member of the association? The news hit the group like a physical blow. Chen Xian seemed unable to grasp the full meaning behind Li Xiao's calm words. Regarding this, Li Xiao didn't hide a thing, maintaining a perfectly composed tone. He revealed that the association had already removed him from their list, which is quite the development, to be honest. Meanwhile, at the foot of the crumbling city walls, an ability user from inside Yichen appeared. He was running anxiously toward the city wall, clutching something tightly in his hand. He held a printed paper announcement and looked incredibly frantic as he called out for Lord Chen Xian. He shouted that he had just received a broadcast from the Ability Association, and the message was clear. The association had officially removed Lord Li Xiao from their list of active members. We have to wonder, what on earth are those people at the association thinking? How could they possibly remove Lord Li Xiao from the list after everything he's done? Back then, if it hadn't been for Lord Li Xiao stepping in to take action, the Ability Association would likely be just like the rest of us, still struggling to survive. They would be facing the tide with a massive headache. It's truly ridiculous to focus only on those 500 casualties. They chose to bury Lord Li Xiao's years of merit, and it seems to us that the association has simply cultivated a new SSS-class user and now intends to discard Li Xiao. They threw him away after they were done using him. After reading that printed announcement from the association, Chen Xian and everyone else present couldn't help but feel a rising sense of pure indignation. They all began defending Li Xiao, especially Chen Xian himself. He couldn't help but think that if, after protecting Yichen for so long, a new SS-Rank user arrived and conspired with others to kick him out, he would probably lose his mind. But that wasn't the case here. As we look at Li Xiao standing before them, he remains inexplicably calm. Chen Xian eventually asked, Lord Li Xiao, aren't you even a little bit angry? Li Xiao looked at the indignant crowd and felt a sharp sense of irony. The city and the people he had protected for 5 years were now criticizing him unanimously. And yet, here were these people, who had never received a drop of his grace or protection, standing up for him. As they continued to defend him, Li Xiao lowered his head slightly and said that, in the future, he simply wanted no further connection with the Ability Association. He explained that his only desire now was to find a quiet place to settle down and live his life. And that was that. Chun Xian nodded slowly, finally beginning to understand the man's perspective. With a newfound enthusiasm in his heart, he decided that no matter what happened, Yichen would be different in the future. It would become a true home for Li Xiao's heart. Yes, Lord Li Xiao, he promised. He assured him that they would never be like those people at the Ability Association. They weren't the type to discard someone after they had served their purpose, and Sun and the others nodded in firm agreement. They immediately turned to look at Li Xiao with an expression of absolute seriousness. Li Xiao nodded back, offering them a sincere thank you for their unexpected support. After spending a long time discussing the details of his future life in Yichen, the group decided not to linger. They had been on the city walls for quite a while, and since it was Sun who had brought Li Xiao back, it felt only right to continue. Chun Xian officially entrusted Sun with the task of organizing proper accommodations for their guest. Once Li Xiao and the others left the city walls, we see a shift in the atmosphere caused by his arrival. The team of ability users who had been guarding the wall seemed transformed. The exhaustion of the past few days simply vanished, replaced by a great enthusiasm that began to draw others in. These ability users were forming something quite different from the official association, all thanks to Kiken's influence. Because of the frequent encounters with the beast tides, the city had a very specific look. The facilities within the city were quite dated, looking much as they did before the tides first descended. Everything was rather old. The entire city lacked any sort of luxury or fancy decorations in its residences. To be perfectly honest, the entire interior of Yichen existed in a permanent state of preparation for battle. Even the ordinary people without any special abilities work tirelessly every day to support the ability users. They provide the necessary logistics, and in return, the ability users greet them with genuine respect. This respect isn't born out of fear for the user's overwhelming power. It is more like a sincere admiration coming straight from the heart. Li Xiao took in every scene he saw, feeling that this place was entirely different from the world where the association resides. Sun asked him what he thought of a particular courtyard, noting that while it had been abandoned for a while, the basic facilities were still completely intact. He would only need to clear away the dust before he could officially move in. At Li Xiao's specific request, Sun had found him a more remote area with a much smaller population. Li Xiao looked over the small courtyard of the villa, a quiet, modest little space. It looked more like a rural farm from the days before the beast tides first arrived. Aside from the main house, standing in the center of the small yard, there was also a considerable amount of open space in the front garden. It would be more than enough room to grow a few plants, or perhaps raise some chickens and ducks. Li Xiao nodded with a smile, telling her it was fine and that he was very satisfied. Seeing Li Xiao's look of genuine contentment, Sun felt her own mood suddenly relax as well. She happily declared that, since he liked it, this little courtyard would belong to him from now on. It would be Lord Li Xiao's official residence, and she promised to return in a short while. She intended to find someone to help him get settled and organize the move. And so, the first steps toward his new, quiet life were finally being taken. 10 seconds of work, followed by vegetable seeds strengthened with abilities. That was the daily task that suddenly appeared before him. A few seconds of mutation, then seeds enhanced by special powers. He watched as these daily objectives materialized out of nowhere. Li Xiao couldn't help but smile, realizing that the tasks issued by this system were indeed very literal daily chores. He had to clean the small courtyard entirely by himself, and more importantly, he wasn't allowed to use any of his abilities. But on second thought, this seemed to be exactly the kind of simple life he was currently looking for. I'll handle the cleaning of the little courtyard myself, Li Xiao said, insisting that there was no need to bother anyone else with such a mundane task. Upon hearing these words, Sun didn't push the matter any further. After exchanging a few more words and confirming that Li Xiao didn't need anything else, she finally took her leave. Before departing, however, Sun made sure to bring Li Xiao some specific cleaning tools to get him started. Watching Sun walk away, Li Xiao picked up the broom she had brought and began to sweep his way across the small courtyard. As he worked, we see the sky gradually beginning to darken over the quiet estate. Meanwhile, at Chun Xian's residence, Sun arrived to give her report. And how is Lord Li Xiao doing today? Seeing Sun enter with the news, Chun Xian couldn't help but stand up and ask her immediately. Even though Li Xiao wasn't present in the room, Chun Xian still spoke of him with the utmost reverence. He made sure to add the title of Lord, a mark of respect for the first SSS class ability user the world had ever seen. In response to Chun Xian's question, Sun carefully recounted the story of how Li Xiao had selected that specific small courtyard. She told him everything that had happened, detailing Li Xiao's humble choice and his calm demeanor. Finally, after hearing that the guest was very satisfied, Chun Xian was able to let out a long sigh of relief. And for the first time in a very long while, a genuine smile began to spread across Chun Xian's face. Finally, he allowed himself to show a genuine expression of relaxation. Even though Li Xiao had only been an icon for half a day, for some reason, from the moment Li Xiao arrived until now, Chun Xian's state of mind felt more relaxed than it had in years. This was a feeling that hadn't surfaced in him for 5 long years. As we know, the heaviest responsibility always falls upon those standing at the top. Before this, Chun Xian was the highest-ranking figure in all of Icon. Every single day, he had to guard himself against a potential invasion of the city. He endured a crushing pressure that ordinary people simply couldn't bear, but now, Li Xiao was here to share that weight. Chun Xian, facing an ability user even more powerful than himself, stopped smiling and turned quite serious. Son, Lord Li Xiao is our greatest hope by at least 70%. I hope that in the coming days, you can look after him and satisfy his every need. Sun, also wearing a serious expression, nodded in firm agreement. Lord Chun Xian, do not worry, no matter what happens. Even if I die, I will find a way to do everything possible to meet Lord Li Xiao's needs. After 5 years of fighting alien beasts, they both knew exactly how vital a superhuman truly is. They understood his importance to the city. As long as Li Xiao stayed, they were willing to give their lives. And we can be sure that Sun would definitely keep her word. The Special Abilities Association had been foolish enough to burn their bridges after crossing them, forcing Li Xiao to leave, but the people here were certainly not that stupid. Congratulations are in order for our host. After his own tireless efforts, he successfully finished cleaning his new residence, earning a pack of random vegetable seeds fortified with special abilities. The small courtyard, which was originally overgrown with weeds and buried under layers of dust, has been cleared. Under Li Xiao's diligent cleaning, the entire place has been completely renovated. Li Xiao brought a stool out from the house and sat down right by the courtyard gate. Even though this little courtyard is quite remote, there are still quite a few people around. About 70% of the ordinary citizens here are constantly coming and going. Naturally, they are curious about Li Xiao, the new neighbor who moved into the little yard today. He felt a bit of curiosity himself, but everyone had their own business to attend to. No one approached him to talk, but the fruit strengthened with special abilities seemed to spark a thought in his mind. Li Xiao, sitting there at the entrance of his small courtyard, shifted slightly. In the very next moment, a fist-sized fruit radiating gold, silver, and purple light suddenly appeared in Li Xiao's hand. And as this fruit appeared, Li Xiao could feel that his perspective on things was already reaching a new height. The courtyard seemed to tremble slightly as the intensity of his SS-4 8th Order special ability began to fluctuate violently, drawn toward the fruit. He felt a surge of anticipation as he caught the sweet scent wafting from the ability-strengthening fruit in his hand. He wasn't sure if it was just an illusion, but he felt the breakthrough barrier that had been blocked for so long finally begin to loosen in that very moment. Just smelling it was that effective. If he were to actually take a bite, he might just soar directly into the heavens. Thinking of this, Li Xiao couldn't wait any longer and prepared to take a bite. As the pulp and juice of the fortified fruit blossomed in his mouth, Li Xiao's eyes suddenly lit up from the incomparable sweetness. As Li Xiao's taste buds blossomed, his thoughts became remarkably clear. It was hard to imagine this was just a fruit, given its incredible effects. More importantly, after he swallowed it, he could feel his special ability rushing through him like a surging river or a vast sea, wandering through his body. The intensity of his ability, which hadn't improved in ages, began to rise again. How refreshing! This ability-strengthening fruit is truly incredible, isn't it? Unable to resist the desire in his heart, Li Xiao took 2 or 3 more bites. He devoured the fortified fruit until it was completely gone. When he finally opened his eyes, a deep joy was shining there. A single fruit had actually increased his ability's intensity by 10%. If he ate a few more, he might just soar to the heavens. Perhaps he finally had the chance to break the barrier that held him back for years. He dreamed of becoming a user above the SS level. Though he is already strong, who wouldn't want to be stronger? With that thought in mind, Li Xiao pulled out another fortified fruit and finished it in a few bites. A moment later, he felt the intensity of the special ability within his body. But it wasn't enough. This time he frowned slightly. Compared to the previous boost, his improvement was only about 8%. And that makes sense. Even as a system reward, these fruits are treasures of heaven and earth, and one always develops a resistance to such things. It was 8% this time. Next time might be worse. After a few more, the effect of this strengthening fruit might become completely insignificant. He realized he should give it time for his resistance to fade before eating more. That, he told himself, would be the better way to handle it. He knew it was good, but he reminded himself not to be greedy. Suddenly, the system congratulated him for resisting temptation with a new daily task. The task was clear. After a heavy meal, lying down lazily without exercise is bad behavior. Those 2 fruits had left him feeling a bit bloated. He remembered the seeds and seedlings that could help him recover his appetite. The system's request was simple: plant them now, without using any special abilities. The reward was a new ability talent. Li Xiao looked on with some surprise at this daily task that had triggered so suddenly. Originally, he had planned to wait until tomorrow to plant the seeds he'd obtained, but he hadn't expected eating the fruits would trigger a planting quest. Since he couldn't use his abilities, he decided to treat it as a way to help his digestion. He muttered this to himself while heading to the storeroom. He found a hoe and looked over the layout of the courtyard. He decided to plant the 3 seedlings on the north side of his small yard. As for the vegetable seeds, he would place them in the small field on the south side. At this moment, Li Xiao felt more peaceful than ever before. On this, his very first day of retirement from the Ability Association, we see that his life has already changed drastically compared to the day before. He no longer needs to spend every waking moment worrying about how to handle the tides of alien beasts. That burden now belongs to his former colleagues at the association. Meanwhile, as the sky gradually darkens, and the bright moon hangs high above, we travel hundreds of miles away to the territory of the alien beasts. There, a white alien tiger sways upright under the moonlight. Beside it stands a black giant serpent, 100 meters long. These two, in fact, are the 2 SS-class beast kings who previously noticed that Li Xiao had abandoned Star City. After spending an entire day summoning their forces, countless terrifying alien beasts of all shapes and sizes have already gathered before them. If anyone were standing there at this moment, looking down from the sky, they would be shocked to discover that the scale of this beast tide far exceeds anything seen before. At this very moment, if one were to look toward that massive crowd, they would see only a dark, oppressive mass that seems to have no end. A terrifying, deafening roar echoes from the horde. Within that sound, one can clearly sense that there is no shortage of powerful S-class and even SS-class alien beasts. And just then, an incomparably vigorous and terrifying tiger roar rings out. The crowd, which had been filled with countless roars, falls instantly silent. Every alien beast prostrates itself, motionless. The terrifying pressure of an SS-class beast king ensures they dare not show any disrespect. On this scene, there isn't just one SS-class beast king, but 2. One wonders if the number gathered this time is truly enough, but to them, it hardly matters. They only know that this opportunity must be seized. Even if that human named Li Xiao is setting a trap for them, they must take the chance. Otherwise, humanity will only produce more and more powerful ability users in the future. It would become even harder for them to destroy the association. The white alien tiger once again lets out a wild laugh, convinced that things will only get more difficult if they wait. After laughing once more, he swings his massive body and leaps forward. The dark, giant serpent also spirals into the sky, and their unified destination this time is precisely Star City, where the Ability Association is located. Tonight, there is no sleep. Countless alien beasts are rioting, and at this moment, one after another, small ruined cities, similar to those that fell by 70%, are waking up. The ability users there are all startled from their dreams. Even from a great distance, these users in the small towns can feel the trembling of the ground coming from afar. Looking out from the city walls into the distance, they can clearly see a dark mass of beast tides gathering and advancing in one single direction. These ability users in the small towns feel only terror. If such a frightening tide were to come toward their city, it would likely be destroyed in an instant. It would have been enough to destroy the entire small town, but fortunately, after a short while, this rushing tide of beasts simply brushed past their city without stopping. At that moment, our heretic hunter also woke from his sleep. Looking at the street outside his small courtyard, it was clearly night, yet the area was now brilliantly lit. Many tense and hurried people were heading toward the walls of Chin City. The heretic hunter could feel that these people rushing toward the city walls possessed fluctuations of supernatural power within their bodies. Seeing the reaction on the street, where people were only coming and going, the heretic hunter's expression remained unchanged. But in his heart, a slight suspicion had already formed. In the next instant, his figure vanished from the small courtyard and reappeared atop the city walls. By now, the number of ability users on the city walls was much greater than when he had arrived during the day. It seemed as though every bit of power in Chin City had gathered there. The heretic hunter quickly found the figure of Chun Swan among the crowd. At this moment, Chun Swan looked incredibly solemn. As the garrison ability user of Chin City, he naturally knew about the outbreak of a beast tide tonight. The first city to discover the outbreak was called Yunshun, a small city similar to Chin City, located about 30 kilometers to the west. The moment the outbreak was discovered, Yunshun sent this message to other cities. What's happening? Is there a new beast nest? The heretic hunter's voice suddenly rang out from the side, pulling Chun Swan out of his thoughts. Hearing the heretic hunter's question, Chun Swan nodded, but then shook his head. It is a beast nest, but the main objective of this particular horde isn't just to find a few scattered alien beasts. The main target of this nest seems to be Star City. Chun Swan looked at the heretic hunter and spoke solemnly. According to the news from Yunshun, this beast nest is more terrifying than any before. Perhaps even if Star City has an ability association with so many powerful users, there is a chance that Star City could be overthrown. I see. Upon hearing Chin Swan's words, the heretic hunter only nodded slightly, his expression not changing in the slightest. Star City, the ability users, the association, they no longer had anything to do with the heretic hunter. He felt no need to understand further. Seeing the heretic hunter's reaction, Chun Swan also understood Li Xiao's attitude. He didn't continue to speak much about the matter of Star City. After all, Chun Swan knew that Li Xiao was expelled by the Ability Association. If he were in Li Xiao's shoes, Chun Swan estimated that he too would be far too lazy to care about the life or death of Star City. Now that Li Xiao has just been expelled, such a massive beast tide is attacking Star City. One wonders if this is a case of reaping what you sow. This thought arose involuntarily in Chun Swan's mind. At the same time, in the distance, a few scattered alien beasts were heading toward their city, drawing closer and closer. Chun Swan regained his focus and prepared to organize the ability users to help him intercept those alien beasts. But before Chun Swan could act, a sudden fluctuation, a surge of power far exceeding Chun Swan's own suddenly erupted, instantly enveloping the city. Realizing something was happening, Chun Swan turned his gaze toward Li Xiao, who stood right beside him. His heart couldn't help but tremble. On paper, the difference between his rank and Li Xiao's was only one level, but now, feeling the terrifying weight of Li Xiao's power up close, Chun Swan suddenly understood the truth. If an SS rank user like himself were to actually face Li Xiao, he might not even survive a single move before being easily defeated. He wondered if this was the true strength of an SS rank user. Chun Swan was terrified, yet he had no idea that Li Xiao was no longer an ordinary SS rank user. His strength had long since surpassed that level. After consuming 2 8th-order skill-strengthening pills, Li Xiao's power had reached entirely new heights. To be honest, he was in a league of his own. Now, even if he faced 2 or 3 Beast Kings at once, he could likely destroy them all with ease. And we see the proof of that power immediately. 1,000 meters from the city walls, those alien beasts charging forward suddenly froze in place, paralyzed by the terrifying pressure of Li Xiao's ability. Without even a struggle, the bodies of those beasts exploded into pieces, leaving no trace behind. It was a clean, absolute end for the monsters. Chun Swan watched this scene in complete silence, his mind racing as he processed the sheer scale of the destruction he had just witnessed. The surrounding ability users were equally stunned, staring out at the empty battlefield where a threat had existed only moments before. The sheer efficiency of the kill was breathtaking, leaving the defenders of the city wall in a state of collective shock and disbelief. It was a display of power that defied everything they thought they knew about combat against the alien beasts. Looking at the awe in the eyes of those around him, Chun Swan's face couldn't help but turn slightly red. He coughed a few times, thinking that if he were truly that incredible, he wouldn't be so stressed every single day. Fortunately, not every user on the wall was ignorant of Li Xiao's presence. Those who had seen him earlier that day could guess the truth. They knew that the person who had just obliterated those beasts wasn't Chun Swan, but Li Xiao. "Don't talk nonsense," one whispered. "That wasn't Chun Swan. It was Mr. Li Xiao." "Which Mr. Li Xiao? Has he really come to our city?" The news spread like wildfire among the ranks of the defenders. It turned out that Li Xiao had indeed arrived in City 7. It was no wonder those beasts were killed so easily. With him here, perhaps they were safe. Many of the ability users who had been summoned for the emergency felt a wave of relief wash over them, their faces finally showing a hint of joy. As the ability users heatedly discussed Li Xiao, Chun Swan didn't feel even a trace of jealousy. On the contrary, when he saw Li Xiao repel that small wave of beasts so easily, he couldn't help but feel a bit more relieved. Now, Chun Swan had only one thought in mind. He had to find every possible way to ensure Li Xiao stayed in City 7 forever. When the news of Li Xiao's arrival spread among the city's ability users, everyone in City 7 became incredibly excited. At this moment, even though most of them had never actually seen Li Xiao's face, that didn't stop them from hearing the legends about him. In an instant, the sadness and lethargy that had originally hung over the heads of all the ability users in City 7 vanished. Cautiously, they turned their gazes toward Li Xiao's position on the wall, but no one made a sound, forcing themselves to stay calm despite the excitement in their hearts. Meanwhile, after dealing with that small wave of beasts, Li Xiao didn't look away. His gaze shifted toward the massive beast wave heading for Star City, which had moved even further into the distance. When he saw the sheer number of beasts in that wave, even he was a bit surprised. If such a horde were heading toward City 7, he feared that even with his current strength, killing them all would likely take a great deal of effort. He wondered if there was an SS-rank Beast King in that wave, and then his gaze darkened slightly. The energy in his body began to circulate. In that moment, a strange light flashed in Li Xiao's eyes as he looked directly into the distance, staring toward the massive beast horde. With a previous superficial glance, he hadn't found anything strange, but this time, after using his ability to sense carefully, he suddenly discovered that within that enormous wave, there seemed to be 2 energy ripples that far exceeded all the other beasts, hidden deep within the horde and disguised as ordinary monsters. If it weren't for the fact that Li Xiao's strength had recently seen a significant upgrade, he might not have perceived them at such a great distance. Furthermore, his gaze flickered slightly. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt the aura of those 2 ripples was very familiar, very much like the 2 he had fought many times before. They were the 2 SS-rank Beast Kings. If it weren't for them, relying on their massive numbers to besiege him, Li Xiao might have been able to decapitate one of those Beast Kings long ago. But now those 2 kings were hiding in the wave and heading toward Star City. He couldn't help but wonder what they were planning. However, He soon pushed those thoughts aside. The affairs of Star City no longer had anything to do with him. He had already resigned from the association, and it wouldn't be appropriate to worry about their business. In Li Xiao's mind, the image of a young woman with an exquisite face slowly emerged. She was the only one who stayed. She was the only one willing to support him when everyone else was pointing fingers. If there was anything he still cared about in the association, it was medicine. Now that he was settled in City 7, he could send word to that girl so she wouldn't have to search for him in vain. Li Xiao turned to Chen Xuan and made this request. As the protector of City 7, it wasn't difficult for Chen Xuan to contact other cities. Upon hearing Li Xiao's request, he didn't hesitate for a second and immediately nodded. Don't worry, Lord Li Xiao. I will send the news to Star City immediately. I suspect that soon, the ability user you mentioned will know that you are here. Li Xiao nodded, feeling grateful. Since that small earlier wave had already been dealt with, the ability users gathered on the walls of City 7 didn't linger. Except for the teams already stationed there, all the other ability users returned to the city's interior. Meanwhile, in the headquarters of the Special Ability Association in Star City, someone was shouting about terrible news. In the top-floor conference room, a staff member with an anxious expression burst through the doors. Inside, we find that Yin Wanxiao, Jin Xian, and 3 other SSS-Rank ability users were sitting together. Ever since Li Xiao resigned from the association, the permissions he once held had been inherited by Jin Xian and the others. Seeing the staff member enter the room in such a panic, Yin Wanxiao frowned slightly. Tell me what's happening, slowly. Hearing this, the staff member took a deep breath. President, we received news that a massive beast tide is approaching Star City, with at least tens of thousands of different beasts. As he spoke, a hint of tension appeared on the man's face. Tens of thousands of beasts. A tide that size is an extremely rare event this year. Tens of thousands. Upon hearing this, the expressions of Yin Wanxiao and the others shifted slightly. Is there news about the number of high-level beasts in that tide? According to the reports, no traces of SS-rank deaths have been discovered yet, but there are at least a dozen or more S-rank beasts and also 30 A-rank beasts. As for those below that level, they simply cannot be counted. The staff member replied hurriedly, still looking extremely anxious. But this time, after hearing the details, the gazes of Yin Wanxiao and the others suddenly relaxed. There were no traces of SS-rank threats. If there were such a threat in this foreign beast tide, perhaps the association would have to carefully consider how to deal with it. But since there were no SS-rank monsters in this wave, the situation was entirely different. Among ability users, every time a rank increases, the difference in strength is monumental. Tens of thousands of beasts might seem terrifying, but in reality, with Jin Xian and the 3 SSS-rank users acting together, they could easily block the advance. The bulk of the beast tide would be handled by them, and since the association still had plenty of SS and S-rank users, it wouldn't be difficult to repel this wave. What are you so afraid of? It's just a beast tide. Do you think our 3 SSS ranks are just for show? Jin Xian looked faintly at the staff member's report. Upon hearing this, the staff member's originally tense mood also relaxed. It was true. Even if Li Xiao had been expelled from the association, they still had SSS rank ability users in there. Ranks, 3 of them, in fact. Repelling this beast tide should be easy. Coincidentally, the news of Li Xiao's expulsion had sparked criticism and doubt from people in smaller cities, who felt that kicking him out was an ungrateful move. But with this beast tide arriving, they saw an opportunity. They wanted to show everyone in those small cities that their association, even without Li Xiao, could still easily handle such a surge. This time, they wouldn't just repel the tide, they would broadcast it live to the public. Thinking this way, Yin Wanxiao rose from the conference table and declared they would use this live broadcast of the battle to send a message. They wanted to prove that the association, without Li Xiao, would find it even easier to fight the tides than before. Yin Wanxiao's gaze then fell upon Jin Xian and the other 3. Although the 3 were now SSS rank users, there hadn't been many tides appearing in Star City lately, and even when there were, Li Xiao had resolved them easily before Jin Xian and the others ever had a chance to act. But this time was different. There was no Li Xiao to stand in their way. The association would show everyone that their SSS rank users were not inferior to Li Xiao. In their minds, the combined strength of Jin Xian and the others would be far better than Li Xiao's alone. We see a hint of excitement in the eyes of Jin Xian and his companions as they grasped Yin Wanxiao's plan. Don't worry, this time the 3 of us will definitely give everyone a satisfying answer with a battle of absolute crushing force. Good. With those words, I can rest easy, Yin Wanxiao replied, unable to help laughing out loud. In Yin Wanxiao's opinion, although Jin Xian and the others had only recently reached SSS rank, and their individual strength might be slightly weaker than Li Xiao's, they were still SSS rank. To him, the difference in strength would always be limited. The numerical advantage of Jin Xian and the other 2 was, in his mind, more than enough to easily smooth over that gap. By the way, is it confirmed when the tide will reach the city? As if he had just thought of something important, Yin Wanxiao asked the staff member. Based on the speed of the surge, it will reach the new city in approximately half a day. Half a day? That's plenty of time for us to prepare, Yin Wanxiao noted with a confident nod. By the way, President, there is one more thing. The most important matter regarding these beast tides. The staff member from the association seemed to relax a bit as he delivered his report. Recalling a specific detail, he mentioned that they had just received news of the tide from other cities. Our reception team also intercepted a message from Chun Xian, the guardian of Yi City. It was sent to the lady doctor and seems to be related to Li Xiao. He wasn't sure if it should be delivered. Sending messages to the lady doctor has become quite difficult between cities during this era of alien beast descents. However, SS-Rank users like the doctor naturally have their own separate communication channels to receive information. Normally, the association wouldn't dream of questioning a member's contact with the outside world. But this time was different. The message explicitly mentioned Li Xiao, and those two words changed everything. That is precisely the name the association is monitoring most closely, so, naturally, the message was flagged. Upon hearing that Chen Xian was involved, Yin Wanxiao's brow furrowed slightly in suspicion. In his memory, he couldn't recall the doctor having any sort of connection with Chen Xian at all. What exactly does the message say? He asked, his curiosity clearly piqued. The staff member pulled a slip of paper from his pocket containing the words he had just transcribed. As Yin Wanxiao took it, his gaze suddenly turned cold. That man, Li Xiao, was proving to be a nuisance. He had already left the association, yet he was still trying to lure away their top ability users. He hadn't expected Chen Xian to be mixed up with Li Xiao, but the proof was right there on the paper. It turned out to be a direct message from Chen Xian intended for the lady doctor. The note informed her that Li Xiao was currently in Yi City, and that if the doctor wished, she could go there to find him. Naturally, the staff member asked the president what to do with the message. Opportunities like this only come once, and Yin Wanxiao decided to end it right there by tearing the paper to shreds. Coldly, he ordered the man to act as if nothing had happened and told him not to worry about it further. He then added that they must notify all the association's ability users about the imminent arrival of the beast surge. They needed to prepare, as he was certain his association's users wouldn't be so easy to lose. He wanted to ensure Li Xiao couldn't take them away, now that the president had made his stance clear. The staff member gave a quick word of acknowledgement and carefully retreated from the conference room. We see that the Ability Association moves with impressive speed when it truly wants to. The moment it was confirmed the surge was approaching the new city, the alert was sent through the association. Once the president released the information, it spread rapidly, reaching far beyond just the registered ability users. Even the ordinary citizens of the new city learned of the approaching tide, and soon, everyone was talking about it. By all accounts, the scale of this particular surge appeared to be completely unprecedented. Has another great surge appeared? They whispered, remembering the last one from a year ago. To stop that previous disaster, the association had apparently suffered devastating losses. People began to wonder why the surge was arriving so soon after Li Xiao had been forced out. They questioned if their actions had been too extreme, as the timing of the disaster felt like a cruel irony. As the threat loomed closer, many residents of the new city began to feel a deep, mounting sense of panic. Given the sheer scale of the tide, some were even starting to regret how decisively they had cast Li Xiao aside. If only he were still there, they thought, surely an SSS-level artist would make facing this nightmare much easier. But soon, other voices began to ring out, interrupting the people's anxious thoughts. The voices of those who didn't share the regret of their neighbors asked what was so wrong with kicking Li Xiao out. They claimed they wanted him gone as soon as possible, calling him completely irresponsible. To them, he was nothing more than an SSS-level artist, nothing they couldn't handle without him. They argued he had only joined the association for the benefits, which, to be honest, was a harsh judgment. Even if he left, they insisted there was absolutely nothing to regret. Without Li Xiao, our new city still had 3 other SSS-level artists to rely on. Could it really be much worse? They didn't think so, as the association still held 3 powerful masters. Since they were all SSS level, they wondered if Lord Yin Xian and the others were really any worse than Li Xiao. They told themselves President Yin was simply too kind-hearted and hadn't wanted to keep arguing. Otherwise, they believed that if Lord Yin Xian and the other SSS-level artists had stepped in, and if they had acted together, Li Xiao wouldn't have been able to avoid his punishment, even if he wanted to. With Lord Yin Xian and the others present, they felt even the most powerful surge couldn't harm the city. Word began to spread that the surge would arrive that afternoon, and this time, the event would even be broadcast live, so everyone could see exactly how Lord Yin Xian would handle it. Many residents of the new city spoke with excitement about how they would solve the crisis. In their minds, they had already drawn a clear line between the 3 SSS-level artists, Yin Xian and Li Xiao. The result of this comparison was, naturally, that Yin Xian and his trio were far superior to Li Xiao. They remembered that Li Xiao could only confine and block those SSS-level surges on his own. But now that the association had 3 SSS-level users, their strength had effectively tripled. At this point, no one truly believed this surge would pose any real threat to our new city. Among the many residents, faces that had been tight with worry began to break into smiles once again. The original tension surrounding the arrival of this massive surge seemed to evaporate almost instantly as the moment drew near. In fact, many people even gathered in small groups to buy snacks and fruit, waiting for the surge as if it were a show. They were eager to watch the live broadcast of the association's artists repelling the threat. Naturally, the association's propaganda wasn't just limited to the new city itself. Other small, independent defensive cities also received the news of what was about to happen. Midday passed quietly, and as the live broadcast began, a hush fell over the new city. Everyone tuned in, watching their mobile phones or the large public screens scattered throughout the streets. We see that, at this very moment, a crowd has gathered at the edge of the city walls. These are the countless figures sent by the Artists Association to defend their home. And standing right at the front, leading the way, are three distinct figures. When the residents caught sight of these three, their eyes couldn't help but light up with hope. A sense of pure admiration filled the air, for these three are the city's current protectors. They are the SSS-level artists, including Jin Swan and Wan San. All three had already reached SS level before their recent promotion to the SSS-Rank. They represent the absolute pinnacle of the association's high-level combat power. It's just that previously, with Li Zhao's singular SSS-level presence overshadowing them, the association's reputation had somewhat faded. Back then, the association's SSS-level standing in the eyes of the residents wasn't nearly as grand as it is now. And now, we see that Li Xiao has already been expelled from the Artists Association. The three who have reached SSS level are now the association's ultimate combat power, worshipped by countless people in the new city. Looking into the distance, one can already faintly hear the low tremors emitted by the massive approaching surge. As the monsters charge wildly across the ground, the residents watching the live broadcast begin to feel a shift in the air. Despite their earlier confidence, their expressions couldn't help but change slightly as the reality set in. Even though a simple broadcast screen can't fully capture the sheer magnitude of the threat, the small portion of the damp, dark scale visible in the distance is enough to cause concern. It is already far larger than any surge the new city has suffered in recent memory. The sheer amount of moisture and shadow seems to be several times greater than anything they've seen before. The last time a surge of this scale appeared was at least a year or two ago, or so the rumors say. Back then, a surge of this magnitude caused considerable damage, even to a city as well defended as this one. Deep down, they began to wonder, will Lord Jin Swan and the others truly be able to resolve this? In the hearts of many residents, that nagging thought couldn't help but flash through their minds. But soon, as they watched Jin Swan and the other two standing firmly upon the city walls during the broadcast, and saw their indifferent, calm faces, the people's tense hearts finally began to relax. In the eyes of Jin Swan and the other SSS-level ability users, there wasn't even a hint of fear to be found. In reality, although the scale of this beast tide is enormous, it is still quite far away. Jin Swan and the others can already sense the specific intensity of this approaching tide, and it seems the reports from the other cities were entirely accurate. There is no presence of any SS-level undead among them, which, naturally, makes their job much easier. As long as no SS-level undead appear, the beast tides below that rank standing before them can hardly cause any significant destruction. Furthermore, even if SS-level undead actually arrived, with 3 SS-level ability users on their side, they could also easily deal with the vibrations in the ground echoing from the distance. The beast tide, which originally looked like mere black dots, rapidly expanded before everyone's eyes as the distance between them closed. It was time to act. Letting these beast tides get any closer would only make them more difficult to handle. Yin Xian and the other two looked out calmly at the approaching tide not far away. In the next moment, the terrifying pressure of Yin Xian's ability began to spread. A faint, blue firelight completely enveloped his body. He rose into the sky as the terrifying, pale blue flames ignited, appearing as though they might burn the very air itself. Immediately after, with Yin Xian at the center, the pale blue flames suddenly crashed toward the beast tide like a small exploding bomb. As the air rippled with the force of the blast, quite a few beasts were blown away instantly. Countless remains of low-level beasts were scattered, the cold light reflecting off the massive frames of the creatures. Despite their size, the smallest being over 10 meters long, they were no match for what was coming. Facing an SS-level user like Yin Xian, his opening attack alone caused a staggering number of casualties. Even some of the slightly stronger S-level beasts were caught in the fray. The SS-level beasts also felt a surge of terror under Yin Xian's assault, visibly slowing their frantic charge. Through the live broadcast, the SS-level power tore into the tide, and the moment the formation broke, countless residents saw the spectacle. In that moment, their eyes revealed a sense of fanatical enthusiasm. Such incredible strength. It's no wonder Lord Yin Xian is an SS-level ability user. They laughed to themselves, realizing that their previous worries had been entirely unnecessary. With Lord Yin Xian standing guard, they wondered why they had ever worried about the beast tide at all. Many truly believed that Yin Xian's strength was in no way inferior to that of Li Xiao. It seemed almost ridiculous now that Li Xiao ever thought he could threaten the association. The ability association, even without Li Xiao, could clearly hold back the tide with ease. We see countless residents caught up in the excitement, discussing the spectacle with fervor. and the ability users stationed at the edge of the new city were also swept into a frenzy by Yin Xian's display. Countless warriors began to act alongside Yin Xian, their multicolored abilities lighting up the battlefield. In that moment, the brilliant glow of their powers almost completely covered the city's edge. Even without the live broadcast, the residents nearby could feel the raw energy in the air. There were so many people watching, though perhaps it was better they didn't see the full, grim reality of the scene. The scale of the defense was absolute. The beasts couldn't even get within 1,000 meters before being cut down. Incredible roars echoed from within the heart of the beast tide, a chorus of primal fury. A significant number of powerful creatures charged forward, desperate to engage in a face-to-face confrontation. Fortunately, among our defenders, there was no shortage of SS-level users ready to match them. While Sijin, Swan, and the others were occupied, some beasts tried to slip through the cracks. But the remaining SS-level users quickly crushed those attempts, maintaining a truly overwhelming posture. The residents of the new city grew even more excited, but in their joy, no one noticed the shadow at the back. At the very edge of the massive tide, there were two beasts acting quite strangely. Unlike the others, they didn't charge blindly. Instead, they remained hidden in the rear, doing absolutely nothing. If Li Xiao were here right now, he would have surely sensed the presence of these hidden troublemakers. The appearance of these two beasts was exactly that of the white tiger and the giant black snake, though their size had changed. They had shrunk to several times smaller than their normal stature, allowing them to remain hidden in the dampness, completely unnoticed. Tucked away in the moist rear guard, the shrunken white tiger and the giant snake emitted a soft, magical glow. They were weaving a fantasy for the numerous beasts fighting the ability users on the front lines, who were now being subdued by the new city defenders. We see the beast tide suffering casualties at a terrifyingly rapid pace. But these two didn't care about the losses within the tide, nor did they mourn the victims. For them, it would only take a little time to summon the beast tide all over again. And there is a specific reason why they have remained hidden in the crowd for so long without attacking. It isn't that they fear those ability users. Rather, they intend to exhaust their combat power by using the massive numbers of the tide. Apparently, even though it seems like a new city, there are still 3 SS-level ability users present. To be honest, these 3 SS-level users are nothing compared to the 2 harbingers of death watching from the shadows. They barely hover at the SS level, and perhaps they haven't even mastered their own abilities yet. They certainly haven't been able to gain full control over them. It isn't just about external threats, but specifically about the one known as the Exile. He is the one they truly fear. Were it not for the Exile's existence, this would have happened years ago. They could have summoned the tide and completely destroyed the new city long ago. But in the past, it was because of the Exile that they stoically endured adversity, even the deaths of many of their own kind. Even united, they were unable to defeat him. Nowadays, many of the undead have given up on this piece of meat called the new city. They have moved on to other places, leaving only these 2 who remain behind. They are still keeping watch here. And now, there is that man they call the Exile. It seems he has truly vanished from the claws of the white tiger and the jaws of the giant black snake. We see a faint light flickering. By now, the dampness has been settling over the new city for quite some time. In any normal situation, if the Exile had wanted to attack, he would have intercepted them from all sides by now. But at this moment, the Exile remains a chimera, without even a single hint of his presence. They have sensed it. To them, this can only mean one thing. They are standing on strange, unclaimed ground. He is no longer in the new city. He has left this place, at least for the time being. It seems impossible for the Exile to return now. This, they realize, is the perfect moment to strike. Even if they cannot completely destroy the new city, they cannot allow it to escape without suffering devastating losses. The white tiger, which had previously remained crouched at the back of the horde, slowly stood up. With its reddish-striped fur, it watched the ability users at the front, soaked by the dampness, and then turned to the giant black beast. It was time for them to act. The giant black snake gave a slight, knowing nod. Its serpent head, held high, moved just a fraction. It observed the 3 SSS-level ability users fighting at the very front of everyone else. The serpentine creature hissed, revealing a deep shadow of pure malice. Previously, it had only acted to test the ritual box, a small experiment, if you will. Was he still in the new city, even after those special beings killed so many of their beasts right before their eyes? Now it was their turn. Today, they would kill these men and tear this city to the ground. As it finished speaking, the giant black beast prepared to take to the sky, launching an attack from the edge of the horde. But just at that moment, a claw from the white tiger reached out to block its path. Wait, I will go up first, the tiger seemed to signal. You wait to the side. Upon hearing this, the icy, reptilian eyes of the giant black snake narrowed just a fraction. But soon, it understood the plan of the white tiger, that formidable creature known as Li Xiao. He is truly extraordinary, possessing an SSS-level strength that far exceeds the norm. And it seems he has found a way to completely hide his presence, even from beast kings of his own rank. They simply couldn't detect him, which, in this world, is perfectly normal. The giant black snake understood. It ceased its sinuous ascent, coiled back down, and hid once more behind the damp mist. The white tiger gave a slight nod, and in the next instant, its body, previously the size of an ordinary beast, began to expand thunderously. Terrifying fluctuations of energy began to emanate from the white tiger, rippling outward. In a mere heartbeat, this power covered the entire field of battle. At the same time, the silhouette of the white tiger had already transformed, matching the original scale of the white mist. For a moment, every strange beast and ability user in the tide stood frozen under this sudden, powerful surge of psychic energy. This wave of psychic power far surpasses ordinary SS class beings, and even those of the SSS class. It's the Beast King, they realized, as the faces of many ability users twisted into expressions of pure terror. Our gaze turns with theirs to the strange white tiger that has suddenly appeared from the rear of the beast tide. The terrifying size of the white tiger loomed over the horde, demanding everyone's undivided attention. And now, that strange white tiger was charging at an utterly terrifying speed toward the front lines of the battle. Naturally, the appearance of this strange white tiger was also being synchronized on the Star City live broadcast. Despite the distance, the city's residents couldn't feel the powerful wave of psychic energy, which was probably for the best. But they knew well enough that among the beasts, there are very few true beast kings. Essentially, most of the residents in Star City had seen this creature before. We recall the previous appearances of this strange white tiger, though things were different then. Back then, Li Xiao would step in to defeat it, but this time, Li Xiao was already gone. Looking at the residents of Star City, one couldn't help but notice the flicker of fear in their eyes. But a moment later, they began to wonder, what is there truly to be afraid of? It is, after all, just a single beast king, and the three masters led by Jin Xian are present. How much effort could it possibly take to deal with it? Upon hearing these reassuring words, the terror that had initially clouded the eyes of the people began to dissipate. If we listen closely, their logic seems sound. They have 3 SS-class ability users on their side. No matter what happens, they simply don't believe their champions could fail to resolve this. It is just one beast king of the same level. Yes, this very beast king. It even dared to approach all alone, and though Li Xiao failed to kill it before, this moment is perfect for Jin Xian and the others to step in and finish the job. Doing so would also significantly reduce the pressure on everyone else fighting. Meanwhile, we find Jin Xian busy clearing out nests of strange beasts on the outskirts of Star City. The 3 ability users slowed their pace slightly due to the sudden appearance of the white tiger. It momentarily interrupted the rhythm of their work, and in that instant, a new look emerged in their eyes. It was a hint of genuine doubt, as their previous scouting had given them no warning. They had no idea that this particular beast nest contained an SSS-class beast king. This strange white tiger, where on earth did it come from? But very quickly, the flicker of doubt in the eyes of the 3 masters began to fade. It vanished entirely. They couldn't help but look at one another, and their eyes revealed something new. A deep sense of excitement. Imagine that, a beast king actually daring to show its face. Does it truly dare to come here, just to die? If that is the case, they are more than happy to oblige. Without a moment's hesitation, the 3 of them shifted their focus entirely, leaving the lesser matters behind. Why waste time on low-level strange beasts when a much bigger prize has appeared? Their eyes were now fixed solely on the strange white tiger. Jin Xian, Wang Kong, and Huang San prepared themselves. Powerful waves of psychic energy began to surge from their bodies, radiating outward. When it comes to dealing with strange beasts, they have no interest in the concept of a fair fight. The 3 of them instantly surrounded the strange white tiger, closing off any hope of escape. A substantial, shimmering glow of psychic power began to manifest around them. It flowed from the 3 masters, with Jin Xian leading the charge as the energy intensified. A terrifying, light blue fire erupted from him, surging directly toward the strange white tiger. Wang Kong and Huang San didn't hesitate for a second either. They launched their own devastating attacks. The combined assault of 3 SSS-class ability users is something that, in any normal situation, would result in instant annihilation, leaving absolutely nothing behind, not even ashes. But in this moment, we see a hint of genuine disdain in the eyes of the strange white tiger. It slowly raised its giant claw and, with a casual motion, gently swiped at the incoming attacks. A series of muffled thuds echoed through the air as the combined power of Jin Xian's team met its mark. To their utter shock, the attack was easily destroyed. Their weapons were cast aside as if they were nothing. And then, with a deafening roar, the weapons were cast aside. 2 hours later, they launched their counterattack. They threw their weapons, and then, in the eyes of Jin Xian's team, we see a flicker of pure disbelief. They had thrown their weapons, but it seemed to make no difference at all. The figure of the strange white tiger had already vanished from its original position. It reappeared suddenly behind Wang Kong, one of our 3 SSS-class ability users. In an instant, a dense aura of danger surged from the very depths of Wang Kong's heart. Without hesitation, Wang Kong mobilized his inner power, forming a red ability barrier behind him. The thickness of this barrier exceeded 10 meters, and the barrier itself was a sight to behold. It wasn't just for defense, either. As the red barrier formed, something else began to happen. Flickering red flames began to erupt across its surface intermittently. This was a barrier formed by Wong Kong's SSS intensity ability. After all, if an SS-level user or anyone lower were to face it, they would likely fear wasting their energy. Breaking it with full force would be impossible, and there's a high chance they'd be injured by the barrier's power. Yet Wong Kong, the creator of this red wall, didn't feel the crisis in his heart dissipate at all. In fact, as the milliseconds ticked by, he could feel the danger descending upon him. The sensation was becoming even more intense, which, to be honest, was a very bad sign. At that moment, the tiger's sharp claws struck the red barrier, which was over 10 meters thick. To a human, such a barrier seems massive, but we must remember the tiger's true size is over 100 zon. Even though the main attack came from just one of its claws, the sheer scale of it was unimaginable. Under that enormous, terrifying claw, the 10-meter-thick barrier suddenly looked incomparably small. And as for Wong Kong, standing there behind his barrier, he looked even smaller, hardly more than an ant. In the very next instant, that terrifying, giant claw and the red barrier collided with violent force. But strangely enough, the massive explosion of power we all expected to see never happened. The giant claw and the barrier met, yes, but the result was quite different from what one might imagine. It was as if a sharp steel knife had suddenly encountered a block of soft tofu. Even though the tofu might be quite thick, beneath the edge of a steel blade, it doesn't stand a chance. It simply lacks the capacity to resist and is sliced clean through the middle. This red barrier suffered the same fate as the terrifying giant claw began carving deep gashes into its surface. In a single heartbeat, the entire 10-meter thickness of the red barrier was completely bypassed. This action, which seems so long when described, actually unfolded in less than a second. The white tiger's giant claw shattered the red barrier entirely and continued its path. It lunged straight for Wong Kong, but fortunately, he is an SSS class ability user for a reason. He finally reacted in time. At the peak of the crisis, a surge of power erupted from within his body. His red ability flared up, allowing him to forcibly shift his position out of harm's way. Even so, the sheer shockwave of energy contained within the white tiger's giant claw was overwhelming. The mere proximity of the strike had already turned Wong Kong's face a ghostly shade of pale. Deep down, he knew that if his reaction had been even a fraction of a second slower, things would be different. Perhaps his entire being would have been sliced apart by the white tiger's claw. We must remember that Li Xiao used to face such terrifying existences on a regular basis. One would assume the gap between SSS-level powers wouldn't be this vast, but reality proved otherwise. On the other side of the battlefield, we see that the expressions of Jin Xian and Huang Shang had also turned quite grim. Even though the white tiger's target just a moment ago had been Wong Kong, the implications were clear to everyone. All three of them were SSS-level ability users who had only recently ascended to such heights. In theory, their strength was the very foundation of this war, and they were supposed to be evenly matched. Yet, as Wong Kong faced that strike, the white tiger's attack appeared terrifyingly dangerous, to put it mildly. Deep down, they feared that if they had been in his place, they wouldn't have fared much better than Wong Kong did. For a long moment, simply because of a single movement from the white tiger, the three SSS-level ability users on the scene stood there, completely stunned in their tracks. They didn't even dare to move. But aside from Jin Xian and the other two SSS ranks, hardly anyone else realized the sheer scale of the crisis that had just unfolded before their eyes. This was especially true for the residents of Xianchun, who, as ordinary people, saw things quite differently. From their perspective, they only saw the three SSS-level users from their association fighting the king. After the white tiger beast and the heroes had been clashing for a little while, they simply saw them scatter, entirely unaware of how close they had come to a total disaster. In fact, many residents of Xianchun even had a look of genuine doubt growing in their eyes. Subconsciously, many people still held on to the old idea that two fists simply cannot beat four hands. They understood that ability users are much stronger than ordinary folk, of course, but they assumed that if the combatants were all users of the same level, then no matter how strong one person might be, it should be impossible for them to resist two other ability users of that same rank. To be honest, they couldn't have been more wrong. This was especially true now, as we see three ability users of the same level standing together. And yet, Lord Jin Xian and the others didn't make a single move. In the eyes of the crowd, a beast king had simply arrived there to die. They believed that with the combined strength of Lord Jin Xian and his companions, if they only worked together, this beast king, to put it bluntly, would never return home. Lord Jin Xian, attack and kill this beast king for invading our Xianchun. One resident shouted with excitement, clearly hoping his voice would reach the three heroes. He wanted Jin Xian to hear him. Jin Xian, he cried out again. What are you three waiting for? Attack quickly and finish off that beast king. Meanwhile, at the very edge of Xianchun, we find Ban Shao, who was still stationed upon the city wall. As he looked at Jin Xian's group, he saw they had stopped abruptly, appearing momentarily stunned. Xianyu shouted as well, but upon hearing these cries, the brows of Jin Xian and his allies suddenly began to glisten as a cold sweat broke out. On the faces of those three, not a single trace of their former confidence or indifference remained. The true power of the Beast King had far exceeded their expectations, which is an understatement. In that very moment, deep down in the hearts of all three, certain memories began to surface, and they started to regret their earlier arrogance. They regretted claiming they could kill the Beast King, and perhaps even conspiring with Ban Xiao to expel Li Xiao from the Special Ability Association in the first place. If Li Xiao were still here, they wouldn't have to face this Beast King alone. Unfortunately, regret is a luxury they can no longer afford. Meanwhile, the alien White Tiger's perception was sharp and unwavering. He had already firmly locked his sights onto Jin Xian and his two companions. He had no intention of letting them escape, and they could feel his gaze pinning them down. The complexions of Jin Xian's group shifted through a dozen shades of pale, but in this moment, they understood that it was far too late for second thoughts. The three of them couldn't help but exchange a desperate, lingering look. Xianyu grit his teeth, telling himself that even if this Beast King was strong, there were still three of them. So what, exactly, were they so afraid of? No matter how powerful he might be, surely he couldn't surpass three leaders combined. At least, that is what a leader-level ability user would like to believe. Despite their grim expressions, we see the three of them trying to find their footing. Finally, they recovered some of their composure, their gazes turning cold and sharp once more. They stared at the alien White Tiger, declaring that today, they would definitely kill him. They claimed it was to avenge the humans who had previously fallen by his hand. As those words fell, the terrifying fluctuations of their combined abilities began to surge again. The power reappeared, but as we look at the Beast King's reaction, the disdain in the alien White Tiger's eyes only seemed to grow more intense. Kill him? He seemed to be asking if they truly thought themselves worthy of the task. The Beast King spoke, demanding that they let the human named Li Xiao come out to face him. Perhaps then, he suggested, there might still be a chance. At least, that was the alien White Tiger's view. Upon hearing that mocking, taunting voice, the complexions of Jin Xian and his two companions shifted. Their expressions couldn't help but grow even more somber as they looked at the creature before them. The tiger appeared utterly relaxed, standing there as if he hadn't a single care in the world. But the implication of his words was clear, and to be honest, it was quite the insult. He was claiming that the three of them combined didn't even compare to a single Li Xiao. In the eyes of Jin Xian's group, a dark killing intent took hold until, suddenly, their figures blurred. They rushed forward instantly, launching themselves directly toward the alien White Tiger. We see countless people watching the desperate charge of Jin Xian and his comrades. Whether they were the ability users fighting on the Shouchao battlefield, or the ordinary citizens watching from Xinqiang in this very moment, they couldn't help but flush with a surge of intense, raw emotion. With the alien White Tiger and Jin Xian's trio at the epicenter of the clash, the combined powers of these four SS-level existences began to collide. The sheer force nearly turned the center of the battlefield into a complete vacuum. Everyone present could feel the terrifying pressure radiating from the four SS-level combatants. The lesser alien beasts and the ability users who had been fighting nearby quickly retreated, realizing that their own strength was simply not enough. If they were dragged into such a terrifying battle, they knew they wouldn't stand a chance. They were afraid that the shockwaves from the battle could easily tear the lower-level ability users apart. And in this moment, just outside the Shouchao battlefield, we see countless ability users and residents of Xinqiang gathered together. Right now, they are all cheering and shouting encouragement for Jin Xian and his two companions. They believe that with Jin Xian and the others there, even a Beast King cannot win. In their minds, it is impossible for the enemy to take even half a step into their Xinqiang. They laugh, thinking that even without Li Xiao, Jin Xian and the other masters are more than capable of stopping the Beast King outside the city walls. Watching the battle unfold on the live broadcast, many residents of Xinqiang are laughing with relief. But from the limited perspective of the ordinary people of Xinqiang, they haven't noticed that although Jin Xian's trio and the alien White Tiger have only been fighting for a brief moment, things are not as they seem. Already, the faces of our three heroes are drenched in sweat. The strain on their faces is becoming evident to anyone paying close attention, as the rapid consumption of their abilities has left them looking quite pale. When we look at the alien White Tiger, however, we see a very different story. The Beast King has been acting with total composure from the very beginning. He seems to be perfectly comfortable, despite all four of them being SS-level existences. But it appears the alien White Tiger is in a league of his own. It is more as if he is simply playing along with Jin Xian and the others. They are completely different existences, really, with their limited strength. It is almost hard to believe they are also worthy of being called SS-level. And right at this moment, the scarlet eyes of the alien White Tiger snap open. A terrifying power rises up, surging directly toward Jin Xian and his two companions. With a roar, the ability fluctuations surrounding the alien White Tiger begin to shift. They skyrocket madly, completely enveloping Jin Xian's trio within them. A thick, heavy sense of crisis descends upon the battlefield. We see the expressions on the faces of Jin Xian and the others change drastically. They want to retreat, but they suddenly discover that the tiger's ability fluctuations have already blocked off the surrounding 100-meter area. They are trapped completely. Perhaps, if their abilities were still at their peak, and if they exhausted every possible means, they might have had a chance to escape. But now, facing this alien white tiger, after fighting for only this short amount of time, the energy in their bodies has already been mostly consumed, which, to be honest, is a terrifying realization. In the eyes of our three heroes, finally, a hint of true panic is revealed. This sensation is exactly like the one they felt back before they became SS level, when they were just low-level ability users. It is the same feeling of helplessness they felt facing a Beast King back then. Back when it was Li Xiao, the Esper, fighting on the edge of the city walls. They were repelling all the Beast Kings, or so they originally thought. They believed that with their current strength, they should be able to face any Beast King. But as for the result, well, reality dealt them a rather forceful blow. Li Xiao could easily repel one or two of these creatures on his own, and sometimes even more Beast Kings all at once. Yet here we see the three of them working together, and somehow, they seemed utterly pathetic when standing before a single Beast King, as they felt this terrifying wave of Esper power surge toward them. The gigantic claws of the white tiger finally made their move. They slammed thunderously against Jin Xian with incredible force. The other two were hit at the same time, right there on the city wall. We see the expressions of everyone who, just moments ago, had been excited and cheering, suddenly freeze in absolute shock. Because this time, Jin Xian and his two companions failed to resist the white tiger's attack once again. Instead, under the sheer weight of the white tiger's strike, they fell catastrophically, sent flying through the air. Their figures crashed directly into the solid stone of the city wall. The entire wall trembled in that moment, and a deathly silence invaded the eyes of everyone watching, as they all showed a profound sense of horror. Through the live broadcast, we see the massive wave of beasts currently threatening the city wall. This terrifying spectacle wasn't just being watched by the residents living within those walls. In fact, thanks to a special publication by the Esper Association, even the smaller, distant cities were able to tune in to this live stream. And at this very moment, Jin Xian, the guardian of the city, was also watching. He had been following the broadcast since before the SS-class Beast King even appeared in the horde. Initially, seeing Jin Xian and the others slaughtering beasts as if they were merely chickens or dogs, Chun Xian felt a sense of validation, even though he despised the association for expelling Li Xiao. He truly had to acknowledge the sheer strength of Jin Xian and his companions. Even Chun Xian himself believed that, given the power those three possessed, if a Beast King were to actually show its face, they would surely be able to stop it, or perhaps even kill it with ease. But as for the result, well, reality gave Chun Xian quite a shock. The mere appearance of the white tiger, a true Beast King, changed everything. With its overwhelming power, it was actually able to strike Jin Xian and the others in such a brutal fashion. In a 1-on-3 situation against SS-class Espers, it was more than holding its own. It seemed Jin Xian and the others were utterly helpless against it. In his desperation, Chun Xian told himself this was already the worst possible outcome. But when the broadcast showed the scene of Jin Xian and his two allies being completely defeated by the white tiger, Chun Xian finally found he could no longer hide the shock in his heart. To be perfectly honest, even as an SS-class Esper himself, he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of dread deep within his heart. The fact that 3 SS-class Espers working together were still no match for a single Beast King and were even defeated in a head-on clash was something that, until now, no one had even dared to imagine. And so, Chun Xian's heart began to sink further into a state of true desperation. He had originally believed that, in the near future, as long as he could eventually reach the SS-class rank, he would finally have the power to face the warlord himself. He thought the threat of the beasts would vanish, and even if Li Xiao were to leave the city at some point, Chun Xian believed he could protect the city on his own without any trouble. But this live broadcast caused that hopeful thought to vanish completely from his mind. An ordinary SS-class Esper, it seemed, was simply no match for a Beast King at all. At this very moment, as we watch Jin Xian and the other two, defeated and coughing up blood on the live stream, and see the experts on the wall already paralyzed by an indescribable horror, Chun Xian's own expression became increasingly troubled and complex. One wonders if the people at the Esper Association ever considered this possibility. Back when they expelled Li Xiao, the one man who truly possessed the necessary strength, did they ever imagine, even for a second, that things would actually reach this point? Li Xiao, after all, was the one who had the strength to defend Star City for 5 long years. He repeatedly drove back the Beast Kings, allowing both the city and the Esper Association to grow. They reached their current prosperity because of him, but this doesn't mean an ordinary SS-class Esper could ever hope to achieve what Li Xiao accomplished so effortlessly. The current state of Jin Xian and his two companions serves as a very sobering example. When they finally find themselves face to face with a true Beast King, the vast difference between them and Li Xiao becomes painfully evident. At this point, even if the people at the association are starting to feel a twinge of regret, it is, quite frankly, far too late for apologies. After all, Li Xiao has already walked away from the Esper Association for good. A sudden, dark realization began to take hold within the room. Since Li Xiao had already resigned from the association and left them behind, a grim thought suddenly occurred to Chun Xian as he watched the screen. He feared that this time, Star City might truly be facing its end. In Chun Xian's mind, the terrifying possibility grew that Star City was finished. No one imagined that the first crisis to strike after Li Xiao left the city would be something that the city's remaining forces simply couldn't stop. There isn't a single awakened being left who can actually stand against an SS-class Beast King. The sheer number of awakened soldiers remaining in the city, no matter how large that army might be, can only become victims in the end. It would be nothing more than a one-sided slaughter. As he thought about this, Chun Xian's expression shifted slightly, reflecting his growing unease. Ripples of psychic energy began to surge all around him, and then he vanished, heading toward the small courtyard where Li Xiao was staying during his travels. The courtyard where Li Xiao lives now is a far cry from the mess it was when he first arrived. The very moment Chun Xian stepped into that small yard, his attention was immediately drawn to 3 saplings planted on the north side. Chun Xian's gaze intensified as he stared fixedly at those 3 young trees. As an SS-class awakened being, he noticed something about these saplings. Even though they were still in their early stages, Chun Xian sensed the hidden, special energy waves within them the second he entered the courtyard. There was a purple-silver glow flickering from them every now and then. Chun Xian had only ever felt this kind of energy fluctuation in rare natural treasures, the kind that can actually assist even the highest-level awakened beings. And those treasures were already at their peak state, unlike these. But these 3 little trees were obviously planted after Li Xiao arrived here, and yet they already possessed an energy fluctuation no weaker than those legendary natural treasures. It is truly difficult to imagine what level of power they will reach once these 3 saplings are fully grown. Chun Xian, how did you get here? And right at that moment, a voice called out from behind Chun Xian, bringing his wandering thoughts back to reality as he turned around. We see that Li Xiao had appeared at the door of the small courtyard house, though no one knew exactly when. In Li Xiao's hand, he was casually carrying a fruit tray. Inside that tray sat a purple fruit that seemed to radiate a soft, golden light. It was a mix of silver and purple, and it had already been carefully sliced into pieces. Chun Xian's nose couldn't help but twitch at the scent. An incredibly sweet aroma suddenly filled his senses. At that same moment, Chun Xian felt his mind become remarkably clear and lucid. His spirit, which had grown weary from the long and grueling defense, suddenly felt refreshed, and the psychic energy that had been stagnant for so long within his SS-class power began to circulate slowly once again. Chun Xian's eyes snapped wide open in sheer disbelief. But Li Xiao didn't seem to notice this reaction and simply walked toward him with a friendly smile. As Li Xiao drew closer, that sweet sensation only grew more intense. The psychic energy that had been moving slowly through his body began to circulate even faster, and Chun Xian's gaze fell instantly upon the fruit tray in Li Xiao's hand. At this point, even if he were a complete fool, which he certainly isn't, Chun Xian could sense that the true cause of this miracle was the fruit Li Xiao was holding. Simply smelling it from a distance had such a profound effect on him. If he were to actually eat it, well, he might just ascend to the heavens. Li Xiao watched Chun Xian's stunned reaction and couldn't help but let out a small laugh. What he held on his fruit tray was, naturally, the skill enhancement fruit he had obtained earlier. If he were to eat all the skill enhancement fruits in a single day, his body's resistance would likely waste many of the fruit's miraculous effects. And so, Li Xiao had planned to eat just one a day. As it turned out, Chun Xian arrived just as he had finished slicing the fruit. Would you like a piece too? Li Xiao asked, gesturing toward the tray in his hand. A single skill enhancement fruit had been evenly sliced into 8 pieces by Li Xiao. Upon hearing the offer, Chun Xian couldn't help but feel a surge of desire for it. After swallowing hard, he wondered if it would be alright, having never seen this purple fruit before. But as an SS-class awakened being, he possessed a certain level of intuition. Since merely smelling it had such an effect, Chun Xian knew exactly how precious this was. A natural treasure of this caliber was likely very precious to Li Xiao as well. Is it really okay? I have plenty more with me, Li Xiao said, sensing his hesitation. Once those 3 saplings grow, the number of skill enhancement fruits will only increase. They certainly won't decrease, Li Xiao noted, pointing toward the 3 saplings from before. According to the system, his skill enhancement fruits seem to originate from these 3 plants. Imagine the harvest in the future once they have fully grown and begun to bear fruit. As for the actual growth of those fruit trees, Li Xiao wasn't particularly worried. He simply glanced at his system panel. There, he saw the reward he had obtained from yesterday's daily mission, the Celestial Skill Spring. It allowed him to designate a location for the system to generate a magical fountain. And the greatest effect of this spring water, as we might expect, is its ability to accelerate plant growth. Meanwhile, as Chun Xian listened to Li Xiao's casual explanation, he couldn't help but turn his gaze back toward those 3 small saplings. He was more shocked than ever. He had known they were special, but this was something else entirely. To be perfectly honest, he hadn't expected them to be quite this incredible. This legendary fruit was actually being produced by these 3 humble little plants. Once they grow into full trees, I won't be so polite about accepting a taste, Chen Xian remarked. With that, Chen Xian reached out and took a single piece. He chose the smallest slice of fruit and ate it in one single bite. The very moment the fruit touched Chen Xian's tongue, he felt the supernatural power within his body explode instantaneously. It began to circulate frantically, with Chen Xian acting as the epicenter of the surge. A terrifying wave of supernatural energy rushed outward toward the surrounding area, whipping up a sudden, violent gust of wind. But before this raw power in Chen Xian's body could cause any real damage to the environment, Li Xiao looked at him and focused his mind. And just like that, a supernatural barrier formed around Chen Xian to contain the blast. This effectively blocked the disturbance caused by Chen Xian's surging supernatural power. And at the same time, the supernatural energy within Chen Xian's body began to increase rapidly. After a short while, Chen Xian finally opened his eyes. But in this moment, we see that Chen Xian's eyes were filled with pure, unadulterated joy. Thanks to that single piece of extraordinary fruit, Chen Xian suddenly realized that his strength had already reached the very limit of the SS level. Provided he was given just a little more time, even breaking through to become an SS level ability user wouldn't be a problem at all. At the mere thought of reaching such a rank, Chen Xian's mood became even more excited, and who could blame him, really? In the same vein, Li Xiao also noticed the significant increase in the intensity of Chen Xian's supernatural power. However, he found himself frowning slightly as the weekend approached. He hasn't quite reached the SS level yet. Originally, Li Xiao had thought that the 8th order supernatural power enhancement piece should have been able to directly strengthen the power. Pushing Chen Xian's supernatural abilities to the SS level shouldn't have been difficult. But now it seems the quantity of pieces was still a bit too small. This is especially concerning now that he is preparing for the 9th entry. And Chen Xian, after all, is the strongest ability user in the cavalcade besides himself. If something were to go wrong in the future, it would be far too much trouble for Li Xiao to have to handle everything himself. And so, Li Xiao invited Chen Xian to consume more of that supernatural power. The entire purpose of this strengthening was to bolster Chen Xian's overall force. If he truly could, he wanted to improve Chen Xian's strength all the way to the SSS level, even if he were only just barely crossing the threshold of that SSS level, much like those 3 individuals from the Supernatural Power Association. But that would be more than enough. At least then, he wouldn't have to deal personally with the majority of the alien beast tides that were sure to come in the future. Chen Xian would be able to resolve those matters on his own. Li Xiao handed the fruit plate to Chen Xian once more, encouraging him to eat another piece. Upon hearing this, we see that Chen Xian's breathing suddenly became even more hurried. Because he had already tasted it once, Chen Xian now truly understood just how much value that supernatural power-strengthening fruit actually held. But as it turned out, what he heard was even better. Li Xiao wasn't just inviting him to eat once. Instead, specifically so he could reach the SSS level, he was being invited to eat a second time, which, to be honest, was an incredible stroke of luck. In this moment, Chen Xian felt as though his knees might simply give way. He wanted nothing more than to kneel before Li Xiao to show his gratitude. 2 small pieces of fruit, and they could easily allow an SS-level user like himself to reach the SSS level. It seems Li Xiao's strength is not just powerful, but truly transformative. Not only is he powerful, but he treats others with this kind of precious treasure as if it were nothing. One has to wonder if the world has gone mad, or if he has, truly. And to think, the Supernatural Power Association actually dismissed Li Xiao. A mistake, to be sure. With a heavy sigh, Chen Xian finally remembered his actual purpose for seeking out Li Xiao this time. Lord Li Xiao, he began, the Supernatural Power Association in the new city. It has been attacked by a massive beast tide, and within that tide, there is also a beast death existence lurking among them. It appeared that the 3 SSS-level users from the association, well, they had already been defeated, in a very short amount of time, no less. He feared that the new city would soon fall completely into ruin. Upon hearing this, we see that Li Xiao's eyes didn't show the slightest hint of surprise or concern. Back when the previous massive beast tide passed through Yichen, Li Xiao had actually realized there was a beast death hidden within the ranks. But he wondered why there was only one. If he remembered correctly, he had previously sensed 2 of those beast death entities within the tide, regardless of whether it was 1 beast death or 2. However, it wasn't something those 3 SSS-level ability users could ever hope to withstand. Their defeat at the hands of such a creature was not at all beyond Li Xiao's expectations. As for whether the entire new city would fall or not, that no longer had anything to do with Li Xiao. If we were to look at the whole city, the only thing that still matters to him is, well, something else entirely. By the way, is there any news? Li Xiao asked suddenly, breaking the silence. This was before the beast tide had even reached the new city. Li Xiao had tasked Xian with helping him get in contact with Shosue. He wanted to share his current whereabouts, hoping Shosue might come to Y City. Based on how much time has passed, it really should have happened by now. Shosue should have responded already, but Xian simply shook his head. The message had been sent, certainly, but Miss Shosue had not replied. This was actually Xian's true purpose for seeking out Li Xiao this time. After all, based on the few words Li Xiao had shared previously, he could tell that the relationship between those two was far from ordinary. Upon hearing this, we see Li Xiao's eyes darken ever so slightly. Meanwhile, we return to the situation unfolding over a new city. At the exact moment Jin Xian and the other two were defeated and driven back, the entire new city fell into a deathly, haunting silence. No one could have imagined that when facing just a single SSS-class Beast King, even with Jin Xian and 2 other SSS-class ability users on the field, joining forces wouldn't be enough to withstand the assault. They were defeated with such ease that, on the faces of everyone watching, nothing but pure incredulity was revealed after the white tiger struck them down. It didn't stop there, it was invincible, and it seemed to mock them for even daring to call themselves SSS class. A thunderous sense of contempt began emerging from those incomparably fierce tiger eyes. To the beast, the strength of these 3 was far weaker than that of the man named Li Xiao. They were simply too weak, and immediately after that realization, something changed in the white tiger's gaze. A cold touch of murderous intent began to surge silently within its eyes. At that exact moment, Jin Xian and the other 2 felt a sudden, chilling sensation. It was a powerful, suffocating sense of impending death radiating through their entire bodies. They were truly going to die this time, even though all 3 of them were SSS class ability users. Deep down, they could no longer hide the growing panic in their hearts. The fact that their combined efforts were so easily brushed aside by the white tiger was sobering. It had almost completely shattered their internal defenses and their will to fight. Suddenly, the massive figure of the white tiger flickered and reappeared right in front of one of the 3. It was Wang Kong, who now found himself staring up at a pair of enormous, deadly claws. Sharp as razors and descending from above, they slammed down fiercely toward Wang Kong. In that second, we see the pure terror of death welling up in Wang Kong's eyes. He let out a desperate cry, pleading that he didn't want to die, not like this. He tried with everything he had to activate the ability within his body one last time. He just wanted to keep fleeing, but in the heat of the previous battle, things had taken a toll. The energy required for the abilities within Wang Kong's body was nearly gone. It had already been heavily consumed, and to be honest, there was nothing left in the tank at all. A faint trace of power, a mere flicker of an ability, surged from Wang Kong's body. But very soon, under the terrifying pressure radiating from the white tiger, this small fluctuation of power was completely and utterly shattered. The white tiger's giant claws finally slammed into the ground with the force of a localized earthquake. A violent vibration echoed through the air, and even the residents of Shinshin could feel the massive tremor. And this time, Wang Kong, trapped beneath those giant claws, lost any remaining chance of escape. He was struck solidly and pinned against the hard earth. When the white tiger finally lifted its massive claws from the ground, we see that in the very center of the impact zone, the figure of Wang Kong was nowhere to be found. He had been replaced by a completely crushed mass, lying on the ground, a blurred heap of flesh and bone. No, to be honest, it could hardly even be considered a body anymore. It would be far more accurate to call it mangled remains. Bright red blood began to pool with that blurred mass of flesh. At its center, spreading outward, the SSS class ability user, Wang Kong, was dead. His end was absolute. There was no hope of survival left. Off to the side, we see the bodies of Jin Xian and Wang Fu, both trembling with pure terror. Compared to the death of an ordinary person, the fall of Wang Kong, a fellow SSS class ability user, carried a much heavier weight. Seeing him die like that right before their eyes brought to their hearts an incomparable and staggering shock. Meanwhile, on the walls of Xianshan City, the originally excited expression on Invanchio's face also froze completely the very moment Wang Kong met his end. At this point, Invanchio felt as though his entire brain had gone blank. The 3 SSS class ability users, in whom he had placed such high hopes, now seemed utterly different. They appeared so helpless when facing just a single Beast King. Not only did they fail to kill or repel the creature, but in a very short time, the Beast King had already slaughtered one of them. He wondered what happened to the idea that the gap between SSS class users wouldn't be too large. Why were his 3 champions faring even worse than a Beast King? Suddenly, an earth-shattering roar echoed, piercing everyone's ears, accompanied by the wild laughter of the white tiger. In that moment, the tide of beasts that had briefly calmed down erupted into a frenzy once again. The terrifying cries of monsters resounded from the beast tide, their voices overlapping in a deafening chorus. The sound weighed heavily on everyone's minds. Immediately afterward, it seemed that the death of the SSS class ability user had spurred all the alien beasts into a frenzy. Every creature outside Xianshan appeared to have fallen into a total madness, charging headlong toward the city. But this time, facing the onslaught of the beast tide, there were no ability users left who chose to confront them directly. We see the live broadcast at this moment also begin to shake violently, the image becoming blurred amidst a series of heavy, echoing rumbles. The sound of the tremors suddenly intensified, but this time, the noise wasn't coming from the broadcast itself. In Xianxun, everyone turned their gaze toward the distant city walls. And there, cracks began to appear in the solid walls that once stood so tall. Immediately after, the entire city wall shattered completely. Chapter 19. If Li Xiao were still in Xianxun, this wouldn't have happened, would it? He had driven the entire situation forward. It was as if a dream had turned into a nightmare where everything collapses. And what of the people of Xianxun now? Before he had come and stayed, he wondered how things could return to how they were. Which of his 3 champions would step up? He waited for an answer that came suddenly. But no, that wasn't their first concern. They were watching the wall at the edge of Xianxun, that wall built when the beasts first appeared 5 years ago. And that wall, which had not been destroyed until this moment, had now completely collapsed. Originally, the live broadcast equipment outside Xianxun was already showing a blurred image due to the impact of the beast tide, but every resident of Xianxun could clearly remember the last scene they had witnessed. The SSS class ability user Wang Tsong was dead, the other users had completely collapsed, and the beast tide was truly invading the city. To be honest, it was their worst nightmare. That broken wall confirmed everything they had seen. It was all absolutely true. A wave of panic suddenly washed over the residents of Xianxun, and they no longer felt that initial confidence in Jinshuan and the other 2 SSS class users. Instead, they were consumed by a deep, paralyzing terror. They told themselves this couldn't be happening. Wasn't the Beast King supposed to be just a man from Xianxun? They thought he would be no match for Master Jinshuan and the others, but the result was nothing like what they were told. They expected the Beast King to be easily killed by the 3 elite users. Instead, everything was inverted. Jinshuan and his fellow SSS class ability users had joined forces and still couldn't defeat a single Beast King. One of them was even killed. If this were a game, we might say they were outmatched, but in this moment, this is the grim reality. The large-scale beast tide has already bypassed the blockade of the ability users and burst into the new city. Terror is no longer just on a screen. Instead, it entered directly into the ears of every resident in Xianxun, making their very souls tremble. From the edge of the city walls, the residents who were closest could see the enormous beasts lunging through the shattered wall. Imagine the scene, massive creatures charging directly at you. As they watched the beasts pounce, the faces of the people in Xianxun lost all light, replaced by expressions of pure horror. These were the same people who had most supported Jinshuan. They were also the ones who had marched at the beginning during Li Xiao's trial. Earlier, they had received word from the association that a beast tide was approaching. Originally, they wanted to watch the battle up close, expecting to see the ability users crush and repel the tide. But as it turns out, the tide has broken the line. The defense has failed, and an SSS class user is already dead. These people, who only wanted to join in on the excitement, found themselves in a very bad position indeed. Save me. Someone save me. They screamed in terror, trying to flee back into the heart of the new city. But unfortunately, given the speed of these ordinary people, they could only run a few steps. Behind them, the beasts that broke through the wall were already upon them. Yes, it was far too late. Even the smallest beast had a massive body dozens of meters long. A human was like a toy to them. They trampled and rammed forward without hesitation, causing screams of misery to erupt across the new city. Those cries vanished quickly after they began. Not long after, the beasts that broke in pushed further into the interior of the city. Countless tall buildings collapsed under the impact of the beasts, and the entire city fell into absolute chaos. At this very moment, we see that group of sycophants who had been so vocal before. The beasts finished tearing through the harbor area, and thanks to their relentless advance, the group collapsed as the buildings around them began to crumble and fall. They were left weeping, desperately searching for solutions in the middle of the chaos, while the filth of their own betrayal hung over them as the beasts continued their rampage. And in this desperate situation, everything seemed to be coming to a violent end. The panic in the marketplace rose like a tide, spreading through the streets as the South Flow area was completely overrun. Suddenly, a light blue ability flashed through the air, bringing with it powerful energy fluctuations as 2 enormous beasts trampling the residents were forced to a halt. They collapsed instantly, their life breath extinguished, as a beautiful young woman with a slender figure in a long blue suit revealed herself. Jisu's expression, however, looked incredibly grim. After the previous ability users had completely broken down, she too had returned to the new city along with the rest of the demoralized survivors. Jisu looked around at the collapsed buildings and the haggard crowds. Everything bore witness to the absolute devastation the beast tide had brought upon the city. The invasion of the new city was now an irreversible disaster. Even Jinshuan and the other SSS class users couldn't stop it, let alone her, a mere SS class user. She told herself that if Li Xiao were still in the city, such a thing would never have happened. Her beautiful eyes flickered, reflecting the ruin of what was once their home. But unfortunately, who was there to blame for Li Xiao's departure? When he was forced out of the association, the entire city had already turned its back on him. Whether it was the officials or the residents, how many were actually willing to defend Li Xiao? Even on that day, because Jisu took the initiative to stand up for him, She later suffered numerous attacks from the association and insults from the very residents she was now protecting. A flicker of deep fatigue crossed her eyes. Deep down, her longing for Li Xiao grew even more intense. Though she felt she had lost him the day he left, she decided that once this disaster passed, she would resign from the association and go find him. But just then, terrified screams for help rang out again not far away, snapping her back to reality. Jisoo turned her gaze toward the source. A rhino-like beast at least 10 meters tall was charging toward a middle-aged man in his 40s. He was just an ordinary man, and his chances of surviving an encounter with such a creature were essentially zero. Fortunately, Jisoo's attack struck the beast's massive body. It didn't kill the creature instantly, but the rhino beast's body suddenly trembled as a terrifying surge of energy erupted from within it. To be honest, this was unexpected. This beast was actually a hidden SS-class threat. It abandoned the middle-aged man, turned around, and fixed its predatory gaze directly on Jisoo. Feeling the rhino beast's gaze lock onto her, Jisoo's exquisite features remained calm as she prepared for battle, but a moment later, her heart suddenly sank. She realized that several other beasts, each with energy levels reaching SS class, were also closing in on her. We find her now, trapped in a crisis. Previously, Jisoo's rescue operations in the new city had drawn the attention of many SS-class beasts, and now, these creatures were looking to eliminate her first. Jisoo felt her spirit waver slightly. In her perception, she could clearly feel that her body was being targeted by multiple threats at once. There were at least 6 SS-class beasts. With her strength, if there were only 1 or 2, she might have stood a chance of dealing with them. But 6 at once? Unless she were an even higher rank, she likely couldn't even guarantee her own safety, let alone anyone else's. The rhino beast that had already locked onto her suddenly let out a savage roar as waves of terrifying energy surged all around its massive frame. Under the influence of that energy, the beast's skin seemed to grow even harder, shimmering with a silver-black luster as it began its charge. It easily tore through every building in its path. Jisoo's eyes flashed as her blue energy spread out, forming ripples like a stone falling into water. Those ripples extended from the rooftops and drifted through the air, creating a barrier between her and the rhino beast. A moment later, the collision happened. The beast slammed into the ripples. Strangely enough, those waves that looked as fragile as water were able to halt the rhino beast's advance. However, Jisoo's beautiful face showed no joy. Instead, her expression grew grimmer as several other enormous figures approached her from different directions. Being SS-level beasts, their intelligence was no longer inferior to that of humans. This coordinated assault left Jisoo with virtually no chance of escape. Damn it, she muttered, her face darkening. She wasn't alone. Many other ability users were nearby, trying to rescue the residents of Shinshin. When they saw the swarm of SS-level beasts heading toward Jisoo, these users were filled with anxiety, though they were far too weak to help. The strongest among them were only 2 S-level users, who were essentially insignificant in the face of such high-level monsters. To be honest, it looked hopeless. If Jisoo tried to resist a frontal attack from all these beasts at once, she would likely suffer grave injuries, even with her SS-level power. In that case, she wouldn't be able to continue the rescue. It was even a question of whether she would survive the next few minutes. A trace of resignation appeared in her eyes. She hadn't even had time to find Li Xiao yet. She couldn't let it in like this. Just as she steeled her resolve to do something desperate, an incomparably terrifying and familiar ability pressure suddenly erupted from the outskirts of Shinshin. At a terrifying speed, and immediately after, the eyes of the SS-class beasts that had been rushing toward Jisoo filled with a strange terror as their bodies froze. They were rooted to the spot instantly, and in the very next moment, thump, 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 the bodies of those SS-level beasts near Jisoo began to shift. Without any hesitation, they swelled up and suddenly exploded into pieces. Their massive bodies, standing over 10 meters tall, simply burst apart. A messy end, to say the least. The ability users standing near Yishui were completely stunned, feeling as though their minds had gone entirely blank from the shock. To easily kill SS-class beasts, or even make several of them explode and die all at once, seemed impossible. How was such a thing even done? We have to wonder, because even a powerful SS-level user like In Xian couldn't manage that. He couldn't do it, could he? After all, SS-level beasts aren't exactly common garden weeds. Even when facing an SS-level ability user, they should have been able to hold their ground for a while. Only now, feeling that familiar pressure, did the corner of Yishui's mouth curl into an extremely beautiful smile. She looked toward the sky outside Shinshin and saw a figure no larger than a black speck heading their way, but what Yishui didn't know was that, as that black speck grew larger and larger, the situation outside the city was becoming even more intense. Outside Shinshin, the gazes of 2 enormous figures suddenly locked onto one another. These 2 were the unique white tiger and the giant black mite that was still hiding in the shadows. Both of their gazes were fixed intently on that approaching black speck. The speck was drawing closer and closer, and the human shape within it was becoming much clearer to see. Sensing the powerful aura that was rapidly approaching them, the unique white tiger and the giant black mite reacted. The two Beast Kings revealed looks of solemn concern in their eyes. To be honest, they looked genuinely worried. This was an expression that the unique white tiger hadn't shown until this very moment. The white tiger hadn't even looked this way when it was facing 3 SSS level ability users all by itself. This aura far exceeded anything an SSS level ability user like Jin Xian could ever hope to match. In this world, there was only one person who could possibly possess such overwhelming power. The two Beast Kings could only think of one name, Li Xiao. As Li Xiao drew closer and closer to Xinqian, the air was suddenly filled with the cries of countless different beasts. They all cried out at the exact same time, and without exception, those sounds told a very specific story. They were filled with tension and unease, as even the beasts below the king level could sense what was coming. An extremely terrifying presence was descending upon them, and in an instant, everything changed. The wild beasts that had been unleashing a bloody slaughter across the Star City suddenly shrank back in terror. They stood there trembling, not daring to make a single reckless move, only whimpering in low, fearful voices. It's quite remarkable, really. A single person who hadn't even arrived yet managed to paralyze the entire beast tide. And as we look back at the Star City, we see the humans witnessing this sudden, bizarre change in the beasts. Everyone, including Inban Xiao and the 2 surviving SSS-level users, Jin Xian and Wan San, found themselves completely stunned by the sight. They had no idea what was happening until the roar of the unique white tiger suddenly echoed, shaking the very sky. Within that roar, the immense pressure belonging to a beast king began to spread across the battlefield. Those terrified, cowering beasts finally recovered some of their will to move and began to calm down once more. Not long after, the figure of Li Xiao finally appeared before us again. As he reached the edge of the Star City, he found the massive body of the unique white tiger waiting for him. It stood there in the distance, firmly blocking his path. The terrifying pressure of the Beast King was now locked in a direct struggle against Li Xiao's own psychic power. But before long, the eyes of the strange white tiger began to change. In the span of just a few breaths, his Beast King pressure had already fallen into a massive disadvantage against Li Xiao. It seemed the others realized just how much the white tiger was struggling to resist. The sheer weight of Li Xiao's psychic power at this moment was simply too much. Suddenly, we hear it, the sharp hiss of a giant serpent flicking its tongue. The sound echoed from the rear of the beast tide, where the figure of a massive black serpent appeared. It suddenly swelled in size, transforming from its original dozens of meters into something far greater. It now stretched for hundreds of meters, and from the body of this black serpent, an equally terrifying Beast King aura emerged. That pressure spread out, joining forces with the strange white tiger. Together, they united their strength to push back against Li Xiao's overwhelming psychic power. Chapter 21. Repelling the Beast Tide. The crushing weight of Li Xiao's psychic power continued to descend. Chapter 21. Repelling the Beast Tide. This was the power that would allow Li Xiao to rejoin the Psychic Association. But unfortunately for the monsters, even though the black serpent had revealed itself from within the tide and was unleashing every bit of its own psychic pressure, it still wasn't enough to stop Li Xiao as he gradually approached the new city. The combined pressure of the two Beast Kings was still at a distinct disadvantage. We have to remember that the last time they fought Li Xiao, his psychic power didn't seem nearly this terrifying. This man had grown stronger once again, and one has to wonder, how exactly did that happen? Thinking this way, the gazes of the two Beast Kings toward Li Xiao couldn't help but turn cautious. After all, they are both SSS-class psychic power users themselves. Previously, the 3 SSS-class users from Jim Swan couldn't even defeat a single Beast King, not even that strange white tiger, but facing Li Xiao in their previous encounters. Even when the two Beast Kings joined forces, they couldn't necessarily gain an advantage over him. This is the harsh reality of their power gap. On the other hand, Li Xiao had no idea what the two Beast Kings, the strange white tiger and the giant black serpent, were thinking. He returned to the new city, but certainly not because he wanted to be rejected or ignored again. He could have just stayed quietly back in the 7 cities. To be honest, it would have been quite pleasant to simply carry out his daily duties there. The psychic power users in that place are always very kind when they speak. Whenever he had a small request, there were immediately countless psychics competing to help him. When he mentioned wanting to remodel his small courtyard, a crowd of psychics immediately delivered materials to his door. It actually made Li Xiao feel a little embarrassed, which is quite a rare sight. The real reason he returned to the new city was because of the live broadcast of the Beast Tide. Li Xiao had heard from Chun Sun that the new city was being completely devastated by the monsters, and Yao, who has an unusual relationship with Li Xiao, was still trapped in that city. Aside from her, he didn't particularly care whether the other people lived or died. Fortunately, his strength had improved significantly once again. In such a short time, returning would have been quite difficult otherwise. Li Xiao simply ignored the two Beast Kings who were watching him with such solemn expressions. As far as he was concerned, these two hadn't been able to do anything to him before. And now that his strength had improved, they were even less likely to pose a real threat. From the outskirts of the new city, Li Xiao turned his gaze toward a specific direction in the distance. There, we see a slender young woman standing in a long blue robe. She was a medic. Even from that great distance, Li Xiao had already noticed several SS-level psychics nearby. They were attempting to besiege the medical faculty, but fortunately, the distance between them at that moment was already well within Li Xiao's own attack range. He breathed a quiet sigh of relief, seeing that the medical faculty was still holding up. It meant, quite simply, that he hadn't returned too late. But just then, a voice called out, "Li Xiao, you've returned just in time. Quickly, repel these two beast kings as soon as possible." The voice rang out from the new city, carrying a distinct tone of command. Li Xiao followed the sound with his eyes, and with just one look, he frowned. The person speaking to him was someone he found very familiar indeed. It was Yin Ban Xiao, who, at that moment, was looking quite haggard and worn down. Standing beside him were many other skilled doctors from the medical association. Among them, we see Jin Xian and Wan San, two SSS class experts, also part of the team. But in that moment, everyone's expressions were grim, to say the least. During the previous tide, they had clearly suffered quite a few heavy blows. This was especially true for Jin Xian and Wan San, who seemed to have made no impact at all. There was simply nothing noteworthy to report. Even the substitute for the French athlete, caught in the same chaos of the new city tide, found themselves in a very delicate position. The player tried to maintain a certain rhythm, which looked frankly ridiculous, as if trying to mix high-class education with something entirely hollow. As for Li Xiao, we see that his presence was about to become intensely electric. Given the stressful nature of a career built on respect within the medical association, things were about to get complicated. "We can wipe the slate clean," the voice continued. "When the time comes, I'll arrange for you to rejoin the association with your original rank and benefits. Everything will be returned to you in full." Yin Ban Xiao shouted toward Li Xiao, his words hanging in the air. A small, confident smile appeared on Yin Ban Xiao's face. In his own opinion, he had played his cards perfectly. He assumed that since Li Xiao had bothered to return, he surely wouldn't want to see the new city destroyed by the beast nest. And so, he figured that offering to let Li Xiao rejoin the medical association would be the perfect condition. In his mind, Li Xiao would surely have no reason to refuse such a generous offer. But unfortunately for him, after hearing Yin Ban Xiao's words, Li Xiao simply remained standing where he was. His eyes shone with a strange light as he stared at Yin Ban Xiao, looking more curious than anything else. Deep down, Li Xiao truly wanted to ask, since he had never cared about being a member of the association from the very start. Why would he think that repelling two Beast Kings was a fair trade for restoring his membership? When exactly, he wondered, did this medical association membership become so incredibly valuable? Valuable enough, apparently, to be worth the effort of fighting off two powerful Beast Kings. For a moment, Li Xiao felt a genuine urge to laugh at the sheer absurdity of it all. The way he looked at Yin Ban Xiao now was the way one might look at a complete fool. He couldn't help but wonder how on earth this man managed to make such a proposal with a straight face. Initially, it was all because the medical association had cultivated its very own SSS class-trained doctor. It was that very man who had kicked him out. Yet now, seeing that his prized doctor was no match for a true Beast King, he suddenly wanted him back. He wondered why things should be so convenient for them, especially since he had finally retired from the exhausting daily grind of defending against those beasts. He was doing quite well in Ichin now, and to be honest, only a fool would be willing to answer to the association again. At this point, Li Xiao didn't even have the slightest intention of speaking with Yin Ban Xiao. Instead, he simply turned his head and began walking back toward New City. He was heading straight for the Faculty of Medicine. But what Li Xiao didn't realize was that Yin Ban Xiao's words were being broadcast to all of New City through the live streaming equipment installed there.